Hey guys, enjoy these new 20 stories. We hope you enjoy them. Let us know your thoughts. And as always, most of you listening aren't subscribed, so please smash that subscribe button and hit that like button too. It's free and does so much for us. We're forever grateful. Now to the stories.
I still remember the night I wandered into that converted warehouse, walls plastered with neon posters for every half-baked startup under the sun. The air smelled like burnt popcorn and overpriced energy drinks, and every conversation buzzed around disrupting something. I'd shown up because I figured, hey, why not? My friends bailed last minute, so I slipped in solo, telling myself this was the kind of scene where you might actually meet someone who understood you. That's my bumped into Philip. He was leaning against a high-top table, twirling a custom-branded coaster between his fingers, hoodie zipped halfway up, and this easy smile like he was in on some private joke. He told me he'd help to launch a dating app, one that used machine learning to match you based on your Spotify playlist quirks and the memes you tagged on Instagram. I was skeptical but intrigued. A dating app that actually cared about the weird stuff you shared in late-night group chats? Count me in. Philip pulled out his phone and showed me a slick prototype, bright interface, a few placeholder images, and a promise that this was going to change how people met forever. He said they were opening a closed beta and I should be one of the first users. My heart did that weird little flip, part excitement, part guilt for diving in headfirst. He asked for my email, phone number, even my work address, so we could ship a special welcome pack. I typed it all in, fingers crossed that this was the beginning of something cool. Over the next couple of days, I kept checking my inbox. The app launch kept getting delayed, first by a week, then by unexpected server maintenance, then by last-minute algorithm tweaks. Meanwhile, every morning I'd wake up to 4 or 5 new emails pitching me random brands. Hi there, we saw you signed up for our beta. Want us to run targeted ads to your followers? Or exclusive offer, corporate partnership to leverage your data. I assumed those were harmless spam. Yet something about the timing felt too precise, like someone was watching which sites I visited and what I clicked on. When I finally pinged Philip, he said, "Oh, those are our launch partners. They help offset server costs. Totally safe." His tone was breezy, the kind you use when you expect no follow-up questions. But my gut churned. I started digging into the email's headers, tracing them back to real marketing firms I recognized from my LinkedIn feed, ones that definitely didn't have my permission to slice and dice my profile for corporate campaigns. By day 5, my social media ads had gone haywire. I'd updated status about binge-watching sci-fi, and an hour later I was getting a direct message from some gadget company offering me early access to a drone prototype. I posted a selfie with my lunch, and a meal delivery startup wanted to sponsor me. My phone buzzed nonstop with pitches that knew exactly what I liked, right down to my favorite smoothie flavor. It felt like someone had broken into my head. That's when I realized this wasn't just a beta test. Philip had handed over my data to anyone with a corporate card and a sales quota. I tried calling him. Voicemail. I texted. Left unread. I even messaged him on the app itself, except by then the link he'd given me was dead. All that remained was a blank page with a logo that faded if you refreshed too many times. Panic squeezed my chest. I spent the next afternoon changing passwords, revoking app permissions on every social network I ever logged into on my phone, and Googling phrases like how to stop data mining while half listening to a podcast about decentralized servers. My roommate asked why the place looked like a crime scene. Post-it notes with passwords scribbled everywhere, old notebooks flipped open to pages where I'd written down every new login I tried. I mumbled something about digital hygiene, and he shrugged, probably chalking it up to my usual hyperfocus. Weeks passed before I heard from Philip again. He mailed a final update, claiming the app had pivoted into a data analytics platform for enhanced user engagement. He offered me a full refund on a subscription I'd never signed up for. That email ended up in my spam folder, which felt symbolic somehow, like the universe was giving me a break. I ignored it. Eventually, I settled into a new routine. No more free scans for personality quizzes, no more handing out my number to anyone who claimed they'd revolutionize my love life. I took a temporary digital detox, an afternoon without my phone, a weekend unplugged. Basic stuff, but it made me feel like I was breathing for the first time in weeks. I never saw Philip again, at least not in person. But sometimes I'll get a random email from a new startup asking if I'd like to join their focus group, and I have to resist the urge to reply. These days I have everything. If someone says they'll sync with my calendar or mind my playlists, I politely decline and then immediately delete the app. It's not that I'm against innovation, but after Philip's little stunt, I learned that the real cost of free can be a lot higher than you think. And that's it. No grand epiphany, no dramatic confrontation. Just the slow, annoying process of rebuilding trust in my own judgment. Now, every time I scroll through an app asking permission to access your contacts, I remember that neon-lit loft and the way Philip's smile looked a lot friendlier than his actions. I learned the hard way that sometimes the people who promise you a shortcut to love are the same ones who will sell you out. So if you ever find yourself in a warehouse full of startups, keep your guard up and maybe stick to the free snacks. I still get chills thinking about that afternoon in the city park, where dozens of activists clustered around solar booths and wind turbine demos. The sky was a perfect blue, the kind that makes you feel like anything's possible. I had shown up because my roommate dragged me along. She's way more green than I am, always reminding me to turn off lights and carry reusable straws. I didn't expect to meet anyone worth remembering, but then I saw Fatma. She stood by a banner that read "Clean Energy for All," her hair tucked under a recycled fabric cap, flipping through a stack of flyers with laser focus. She looked like someone who'd spent her life chasing solutions instead of likes. When our paths crossed, she slipped a badge into my hand and struck me as so genuine that I didn't hesitate to follow her into a guided tour of a mock offshore wind farm installation. I was hooked by how she explained the mechanics, tossing in stats about carbon reduction like it was casual conversation. That day, we wandered from booth to booth, sampling vegan snacks and testing virtual reality simulations of solar panel farms stretching to the horizon. I thought I'd stumbled onto someone with the same weird obsession for powering homes with roof tiles. Every time she spoke, a small crowd gathered. Her energy was magnetic, like you wanted to believe in every word she said. At the end of the rally, she asked for my contact info. I figured she needed volunteers for future events. I gave her my phone number, my email, even my home address, thinking I'd signed up for newsletters or maybe a petition. Over the next few days, my phone buzzed with updates. Invitations to grassroots workshops, fundraising drives for portable battery projects, and links to research papers. I was thrilled to see notifications about local tree planting days and beach cleanups. Each email felt like a direct line to purpose, a chance to do something that actually mattered. I told my friends I was becoming community champion material, that I might even start my own mini campaign. I felt a surge of pride every time I clicked RSVP. Then I noticed something strange. My phone was dying faster than usual, even though I hadn't cranked up the screen brightness. I chalked it up to the usual dozen apps I kept open, but when I checked my location history, I saw entries that didn't make sense. Early morning check-ins at a coffee shop I never visited, footprints leading to a museum 2 miles from my flat, timestamps for subway stations I hadn't taken since last week. My sleep app recorded periods of movement when I was supposed to be in deep rest. That's when the knot formed in my stomach. I went back through the rally emails, hunting for any suspicious attachments. One message had a subtle link embedded in the phrase "volunteer portal." When I tapped it, a GPS tracker quietly installed itself on my phone, disguised as an event calendar. I remembered how Fatma had asked me to keep my coat on during the group photo, saying it was for brand consistency. I shrugged, not realizing she slipped something under the collar pocket, a small tag, almost invisible. That little square held a hidden chip. My first reaction was disbelief. I'm not the kind of person who worries about conspiracies, but as I watched the dot on my map creep across the city, synchronized perfectly with my real movements, I felt a wave of violation I'd never known before. I canceled my weekend hiking plans and stayed indoors, moving only to check bedroom, kitchen, living room. I wondered if anyone else had gone through the same thing. Maybe the whole volunteer crew was compromised. I tried confronting Fatma through text. I typed in deleted messages, staring at her name on my screen. At one point, I just wrote, "What did you do?" and left it at that. No response. I even showed up at the patch of grass where the rally ended, thinking I might catch her packing up tents. Instead, I found only empty banners fluttering in the breeze, volunteers settling down with coffee and pastries clueless. No one mentioned the thing about the hidden ghosts or the new shipment of data to some corporate client. Panic became my daily background noise. I started carrying a spare phone, a burner with no apps, and left my main phone locked inside a Faraday pouch whenever I went out. I fell back on old school maps and paper schedules, scribbling my plans in a little notebook I kept in my pocket. It felt absurd, like a teenager conjuring stories from spy movies. But the tracker kept emitting little pings, and every few hours I'd sneak a peek to make sure it hadn't teleported somewhere new. As the days rolled into weeks, I realized Fatma had built an entire network of volunteers she could monitor in real time. She must have sold that data to clients who craved hyperlocal intel. Retailers wanting to know pedestrian traffic, political campaigns mapping public gatherings, even private investigators shadowing targets. It made sense how she talked about expanding our network during a follow-up email. She meant something completely different from my naive hopes. I reached out to a friend who works in cybersecurity. She drilled holes through the chip, extracted it with tweezers, and confirmed it was a commercial Gibbs beacon disguised with consumer-grade packaging. The relief I felt when that little thing was gone was massive, but it didn't erase the fact that someone I admired had treated me like a data source. I spent an entire Saturday in her tiny workshop, learning how to scrub my phone and secure my personal network. We laughed at how I'd gone from rally rabble rouser to incognito agent in a matter of days. Eventually, I went back to the park where it all started. The booths were gone, replaced by food trucks and flowering cherry trees. I sat on a bench, folded my arms, and thought about how easily I'd handed over my trust. I wondered if Fatma had a dozen more people out there, unaware of what was strapped to their jackets, tagged with that same innocuous logo. I left a draft complaint with the data commission, too exhausted to send it. Maybe someone else would uncover the scheme. Life slowly went back to normal. I reinstalled only the essential apps on my phone, and every time I downloaded one, I'd pause to read the privacy policy, an exercise I'd always skipped before. My roommate joked that I'd turned into a paranoid detective, but I knew it was the only way to feel safe again. I even started wearing a lapel pin that says, "Ask me first," a little joke to remind myself not to trust strangers at rallies, no matter how inspiring they seem. These days, when I see a clean energy event advertised, I hesitate. I remember how easy it was to be lured by passion and purpose, only to discover someone turned my goodwill into a goldmine. But I still care about renewable power and low-carbon futures. I just learned that if you want to stand tall at a rally, you need more than a banner. You need a healthy dose of skepticism. That Sunday morning, the air felt like a soft promise. Dew still clinging to the grass, the city skyline just waking up behind me. I'd signed up for rooftop yoga because I wanted to try something new, shake off the usual weekend routine of scrolling through my phone. When I arrived, sunlight was pooling between the buildings and every mat was already laid out in precise rows. That's where I met Shoaib. He had this calm confidence, like he floated onto the rooftop instead of walking. He introduced himself with a warm handshake and moved through poses beside me as if he'd been guiding classes in my dreams. His voice was steady, weaving in reminders to breathe into the stretch and feel the energy flow through your spine. I figured this was the kind of teacher everyone raves about online, the one who can make the impossible feel achievable. After class, he told me about his private sessions, small groups, quieter spaces, deeper focus. I was curious, so I signed up for a weekly slot in his home studio, a minimalist loft turned yoga haven with potted plants and flickering candles. Every Tuesday afternoon, I'd head over after work, slipping off my shoes, unrolling a mat on polished wood floors. Shoaib always greeted me with a gentle nod and the faint scent of sandalwood. Those afternoons became the highlight of my week. He corrected my alignment with patient hands, guided me through breathwork that left my mind still for the first time in days. I tracked my progress in a notebook, jotting down how much farther I could lean into a fold or how my balance stayed steady longer. It felt like genuine transformation, like I was unlocking parts of myself I didn't know existed. One afternoon, he asked if I minded in setting up a camera to record our session. He said his advanced clients loved watching playbacks to refine their form. I agree without hesitation. Why not? I figured it would be cool to see my own posture and maybe pick up small tweaks I missed in real time. He placed a discreet camera in the corner, no big tripod, just a tiny lens perched on a shelf. It felt unobtrusive, almost like part of the studio decor. I ignored it as I moved through my sun salutations and deep twists, trusting him completely. Afterward, he told me he'd email me the footage so I could review my poses at home. I waited for his message, thinking about how impressive it would look if I posted a short clip to my stories, maybe even tag him. Days went by with no email. When I mentioned it next session, he apologized, saying he was having upload issues. He promised to share the files by weekend. That weekend came and went with nothing. I didn't push him. It still felt early. Maybe his Wi-Fi was slow or his hard drive was full. It didn't seem like a big deal. By the third week, a link appeared in my inbox. I clicked it eagerly, expecting to find a private folder with my video. Instead, I landed on a public page filled with dozens of clips. People I'd never seen before practicing side planks and headstands. To my horror, one of them was labeled with my name and date, the footage showing close-up angles of me drifting into deep poses, my shirt rising slightly with each breath. Above the clip was a price tag. Intimacy tutorial, perfect alignment. It felt obscene. I slammed my laptop shut, heart pounding. Footage of me alone in that studio, my muscles flexing, my eyes closed. It was intimate in a way I never consented to share. I stared at the link, the screen's blue glare reflecting a mix of anger and panic. How many people had paid to see that? Who would watch? My mind raced through every moment in that room, wondering if the camera had panned closer than I realized. I stormed back to Sholei's home studio the next Tuesday. He greeted me with a warm smile, like nothing was wrong. I slammed my phone on the shelf. "Why is there footage of me online?" I demanded. His expression flickered, a brief hesitation before he said it was part of a new educational series he was launching. He claimed he blurred faces for privacy purposes, but my clip had my face clear as day. I told him to take it down immediately. He nodded, promising an apology email by end of day. I left feeling hollow, like I was stumbling through the rest of my afternoon in a daze. I blocked the site on my laptop and cleared my browser history, but the knowledge that those clips had existed, and maybe still did on some backup server, gnawed at me. That evening, I Googled his name plus the URL, uncovering forum posts and not-so-hidden discussions about this intimacy tutorial series. Shoei was dividing his clients into tiers: basic access to recorded classes, premium access to advanced sessions, and a handful of exclusive experiences that included one-on-one guided tutorials. Prices ranged from a few bucks to a hefty monthly subscription. The forum chatted about the perfect clarity of his recordings, the angles that highlighted muscle engagement, and natural expressions. It was surreal and degrading. I reached out to a friend who knows a bit about copyright. She said he had breached my image rights and that I could issue a takedown. The next morning, I sent a formal notice to his email and to the hosting service, demanding removal of my footage under privacy law. He replied apologetically, claiming he never imagined anyone would mind. Within 24 hours, the clip vanished, but I knew it was too late. It lived on in caches, on phones of strangers who downloaded it, maybe even mirrored somewhere overseas. The fallout spilled into every part of my life. I hesitated to wear the same top in public. I turned sideways when someone took a photo in my neighborhood. I stopped going to outdoor yoga events because I imagined hidden cameras peeking out from behind potted plants. My notebook of progress notes collected dust. I couldn't bear to revisit those moments in black and white. Eventually, I requested a refund for my remaining sessions and found a new teacher at a cramped basement studio with no cameras allowed. She had a simple rule: no recording devices. It felt reassuring to be in a room focused solely on practice, no tech buzz in the corner. I returned to breathing deeply in class, learning to trust my own sensations without worrying who might be watching. It's funny how practice meant to bring calm turned into a source of doubt. I keep wondering how someone who spoke so gently could break that unspoken bond of trust so casually. Now, every time I roll out a yoga mat, I double-check the room for cameras. I ask instructors up front if they record sessions. It feels oddly paranoid, but I'd rather be safe than lose that sense of security again. I still do yoga, but mostly at home with YouTube videos I trust. I found a channel run by friends, one that clearly spells out privacy rules: no downloads, no public streams. It's not the same vibe as a live instructor, but it's honest, and that matters more than any perfect alignment. I learned the hard way that sometimes the calmest voices can conceal the sharpest betrayals. And once you see behind the mask, it's nearly impossible to unsee. I'd signed up for a personal training package because I wanted to get serious about my fitness. Nothing fancy, just ditch the beer belly before summer hit. When Adnan introduced himself, He had that confident stance, shoulders back like he'd worn a badge his whole life. He said he was an ex-cop turned trainer, and I figured if he could handle crime scenes, he could handle my clumsy squat form. Our first session was straightforward, warm-ups, bodyweight circuits, and he pushed me harder than any app had. He monitored my form like a hawk, corrected my posture with precise instructions, and tossed in small compliments when I nailed a set. He had stories, too, tales from his policing days about teamwork and discipline. I hung on every word, thinking I'd stumbled onto someone who not only cared about reps but about mindset, too. By the end of week 2, I was waking up sort of oddly proud. Adnan made it feel like I was building more than muscle. Then he dropped the bomb. To streamline your sessions, I can set up an autopay from your checking account. No more fussing with credit cards. He framed it as a perk. No late payments, no awkward, can I borrow your card moments. I like the sound of hassle-free billing. He pulled out a tablet, opened a PDF with tiny legal jargon, then handed it to me. Just sign here, he said, tapping a line near the bottom. I skimmed the form, saw something about authorization for direct debit and legal compliance, but trusted him. He said ex-cops deal with paperwork all the time, so I scribbled my signature. Over the next month, my routines felt locked in. Adnan's spreadsheets tracked my progress, and he messaged me midweek with motivational check-ins. Then I got an alert. A large withdrawal from my account flagged on my banking app. I stared at the screen, more taken out than the agreed-upon monthly fee. I called the bank. They confirmed the charge was marked as authorized. My heart sank. I texted Adnan, "Hey, did you update the billing?" He responded with a shrug emoji and said it must be a glitch. "I'll look into it," he wrote, then followed with, "Don't worry, you're good." But it didn't stop. Every few days, another hefty sum left my account, under labels like training compliance fee, liability coverage, and performance assessment surcharge. It felt like I was funding a shadow operation. I dug out the contract, reread every clause. Buried in the fine print was a line allowing variable charges at trainers' discretion based on performance metrics. That sounded insane. I hadn't agreed to performance-based fees. I reached out to Adnan during our next session, laying the contract on the bench. His calm turned steely. He reminded me I'd signed willingly and that this was standard in high-risk coaching. I argued. He said my improvements meant I was hitting milestones that triggered administrative adjustments. He held up the paper like a shield. I felt trapped, like a rent agreement you can't escape. I asked for a copy of the billing log. He emailed me a spreadsheet that looked official. Dates, session codes, variable multipliers. It was detailed enough to intimidate me into silence. He said if I canceled, I'd face a cancellation penalty and all unpaid assessments would be due immediately. It felt like a legal loophole designed to bleed me dry. Panic set in. I drained my savings, shifting money into a buffer account. I started skipping sessions, telling how I was traveling for work. He didn't push back. He just continued billing. My paycheck disappeared faster than usual, and I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if ex-cops really turned into lawyers that wrote predatory contracts. I reached out to a friend who was a paralegal. She told me those clauses might be enforceable if the wording was airtight, and that I'd need a lawyer to fight it. I didn't have the cash to hire one. When my account dipped into overdraft, the bank slapped me with fees. I sent Adnan a final message. "I need to stop this. Reverse any unauthorized charges." He said he'd refund me for unearned assessments, but then dinged me for a processing fee. I felt a wave of nausea. It was never ending. He worked through loopholes I didn't even know existed. I realized he knew exactly how to manipulate the system. Adnan's calm excuses cut deeper than the sudden emptiness in my bank balance. One Friday afternoon, I showed up at the gym unannounced. His office door was closed. I knocked, curtain fumbling. He opened it looking surprised, like he hadn't seen me in weeks. I slid the contract across the desk. "You said you fixed this," I said. He leaned back, arms folded, and explained that refunds could only be processed at quarter end, according to our original agreement. I slammed the contract off the desk and stormed out, feeling absurdly childish, like I was stuck in paperwork quicksand. Over the next month, I battled new calls to his number, emails that went unanswered, and a growing stack of overdraft notices. I finally contacted a free legal clinic. They reviewed my contract and called it highly questionable, but warned nothing was guaranteed. The clinic helped me draft a demand letter citing consumer protection laws and predatory practices. I mailed it to him and copied the gym owner. Within days, the withdrawal stopped. A single partial refund showed up, enough to clear my overdraft, but not enough to cover every inflated assessment. I walked back into the gym to see Adnan's mat rolled up, his locker empty. The front desk said he'd moved on to other opportunities. I stared at the empty office, the ghost of his calm posture hanging in the air. It felt surreal, like he vanished into the paperwork he'd spun around me. I closed my account, opened a new one, and switched gyms. I still hit the weights, still track my progress. Just now I pay in cash at the front desk. There's no grand victory in this story. I lost time, peace of mind, and a chunk of savings I'll never get back. Most days, I pushed past the memory of someone who once taught me discipline but weaponized the law against me. I learned you can't skip leg day on caution, especially when someone with a badge knows how to exploit every clause. Now, when I fill out any form, I read every line, and maybe that's enough for moving forward. The moment I stepped into that grand lecture hall, I felt like I'd walked onto a movie set. Arched ceilings loomed overhead, rows of polished wooden benches stretched out before me, and a gallery of stern portraits lined the walls like silent overseers. I'd signed up for a weekend law seminar because I thought it'd be a cool way to mix up my usual brunch and shopping routine. I ended up meeting Ikra during a break over a shared cup of coffee in a velvet upholstered lounge that smelled faintly of old books and espresso. She wore a crisp blazer and carried a leather-bound notebook full of neat bullet points. When she spoke about contract law, she made clauses and caveats sound like the plot twists of a thriller. I was impressed by how she connected centuries-old legal precedents to today's corporate scandals. By the time the afternoon session ended, I was buzzing with questions about property rights and asset protection. She saw my notebook of half-formed doodles and jokes that I needed a pro on my side if I ever got serious about my future. I laughed, but there was a spark in her eyes, like she'd already scoped out my financial situation. Over the next few days, we bumped into each other at lunch breaks and panel discussions. She invited me to join a small study group that met in a sunlit courtyard. We'd circle up on wrought iron chairs, phones switched off, and debate everything from tort reform to intellectual property. I started to look forward to those afternoons more than the talks themselves. She had this way of making dense legal jargon feel like a shared secret. At the end of one session, she leaned in and said, "Eventually, every couple should have a prenuptial. It's just smart planning." It sounded logical, like sunscreen or a seatbelt. Weeks later, over falafel wraps at a street-side food stall, she mentioned she was an estate planning attorney. She explained her work with high-net-worth clients, offshore trusts, and multi-jurisdictional asset transfers. When she asked if I'd ever considered how my savings, investments, and whatever future inheritance I might receive could be protected, I admitted I'd never thought that far ahead. She smiled and said she could draft a basic prenuptial for me, free of charge, just to show me what mine might look like in a perfect world. I hesitated for a second. Drafting legal docs with someone I barely knew felt intense, but her confidence was contagious. I agreed. A week later, she sent me a PDF of the prenuptial agreement. It was 7 pages long, laid out in clean typeface, with clauses covering every conceivable scenario. Division of property, spousal support limits, intellectual property rights, and a mysterious section titled Offshore Asset Allocation. I skimmed it. The tone was professional and reassuring, with phrases like ensure equitable distribution and shield assets from unnecessary liabilities. On page 6, I saw the clause, all premarital and marital assets shall, upon signing, be irrevocably transferred into the Ikra family trust, domiciled in the Cayman Islands. I paused. I hadn't asked for offshore anything. I sent her a message. "Hey, what's this Cayman trust? I thought we were just doing a simple prenup." She replied almost instantly. "That's your choice. It's standard for people who want privacy and protection. No one sees the details and taxes are minimized. If you'd rather leave it out, we can adjust." I breathed easier. I told her to drop the offshore part, that I just wanted boundaries in case of divorce. She said, "Sure, no problem." A few hours later, she sent an updated version. I signed electronically on my tablet and asked her to store the original. I thought that was the end of it. Months passed. I ran into Ikra at a networking event, and we toasted with sparkling water to life's big adventures. I forgot the prenuptial even existed until I got a curious email from my financial advisor. She wrote, "Can you explain this recent transfer of assets to an offshore trust?" My stomach dropped. I logged into my brokerage account and saw that all my cash reserves, my small stock holdings, even the proceeds from selling my old car, had been moved into something labeled IQF. I called it ICRA. She sounded puzzled. "Are you sure?" "That should have been removed when we adjusted the agreement." I quoted her own words. "We can adjust," and asked why it wasn't reflected. She told me she was traveling and would look into it when she returned. Days later, she mailed to say there'd been a clerical error and that the updated agreement wasn't saved correctly. She promised to reverse the transfer by end of week. Nobody warned me that undoing an offshore transfer isn't like reversing a mistaken email. It involved a web of legal filings, letters to trustees, notarizations from 2 different jurisdictions, and a mountain of fees. I spent late nights on Zoom calls with her firm's associates, reviewing forms that asked for signatures notarized in places I'd never heard of. I asked why the process was so convoluted. They said that was just how it worked, but they reassured me it would all be back in my account within a month. A month went by. The balance in my main account stayed 0. Instead, I racked up service charges from paying bills that bounced and overdraft fees from rent. I messaged Ikra, "This isn't happening." She told me the trustee in the Caymans was being slow because of local regulations, and that patience was part of the game. She sent me a forward of an email chain between her office and the trustee bank. Multiple reminders marked urgent, but no real action. I felt myself spiraling like I was watching my own finances evaporate into an overseas black hole. I decided to take more direct action. I flew out to the firm's London office and demanded to see her in person. As I arrived, I realized this was more than a clerical error. She walked in, effortless as ever, smiling like she'd just poured me a fresh cup of coffee. I slammed the printed trustee on her desk. She apologized again, claiming she'd been overwhelmed by client matters and that my case had slipped through cracks. She insisted it would be rectified within 2 weeks. I left feeling deflated but determined. I contacted a solicitor specializing in offshore trusts. She told me the trust deed I'd signed was irrevocable by design, meaning I'd effectively gifted my assets to a structure I couldn't dismantle without the trustee's approval, and they had no legal obligation to return funds just because I changed my mind. I flashed back to her casual, "We can adjust" comment, now ringing like a cruel joke. It turned out that clause applied only to the English prenup text, not to the trust deed itself. I wrote to the trustee directly, explaining my unauthorized transfer and demanding the entire corpus of my assets be returned. They replied citing Cayman law. The settlor cannot unilaterally revoke or amend the trust. Any request must be made through due process and is subject to trustee discretion. That discretion could take years, cost thousands, and had no guarantee of success. I realized I'd been outmaneuvered. The woman I trusted with my legal education had used her expertise to quietly siphon my life savings into a vault I couldn't open. When I returned home, I closed my eyes and pictured that lofty seminar hall, the portrait staring down as I laughed about future courtroom dramas. Now I sat in my flat, going through receipts for every fee I'd incurred, wondering how a simple seed of trust could grow into a labyrinth of offshore statutes. I had nothing left in my old accounts except a promise printed on glossy paper and the faint echo of someone saying "no problem" while watching my money vanish. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown, no final gotcha moment. Just the suppression of my own hope by someone who knew exactly how to cloak intention and legalese. I still owe the trust hundreds in maintenance fees just for holding my ghost of an estate. I locked away that leather-bound notebook, bought a new one, and filled it with personal reminders. Question every clause, read every line, trust your instincts more than persuasive smiles. And if I ever see a law seminar advertised again, I'll sign up. But this time, I'll keep my wallet in my pocket. That warm Saturday, when the pop-up health fair showed up on the university quad, it felt like a stroke of luck. Booths with free smoothie samples and blood pressure checks lined the walkways, and everyone laughed over giant inflatables promoting wellness. I wandered past a stall advertising cutting-edge fertility research, There were mannequins displaying ultrasounds and smiling students in lab coats. That's where I met Nemo. He introduced himself as a PhD candidate studying ovarian function and egg preservation. His pitch was honest and straightforward. Volunteers would get a comprehensive health workup, plus compensation for their time. I was in my late 20s, had never thought about fertility beyond late-night Google searches, and the chance to get a full panel of hormone tests for free sounded practical. He handed me a consent form thicker than a novella and promised the blood draws would be painless. I signed, figuring I'd get some useful data and earn a little cash to cover rent. Over the next week, I got a call asking me to visit the campus clinic for my ultrasound. The room smelled faintly of disinfectant and vanilla air freshener. Nemo guided me onto the exam table and chatted about his research, how egg quality declines with age, how his study could pave the way for more women to freeze their gametes early. He reassured me constantly, calling the procedure minimally invasive. He showed me diagrams of follicles and gestured like he wanted me to feel safe. I nodded and smiled, trusting that this was standard protocol. Then came the big day. The consent form had signed allowed blood draws, ultrasounds, even non-surgical retrieval techniques. What I thought meant extra imaging turned out to be an invitation to an actual egg collection procedure. As they wheeled me to the Or-style suite, anxiety hit like a freight train. Nemo squeezed my hand and said, "You'll be fine. This helps future moms avoid risks down the road." He wore scrubs embroidered with the university logo and carried himself like a guardian of science. They put me under light sedation, and I remember one sharp pinch, then a soft tunnel of voices. When I woke, groggy and confused, goggles still blurring the overhead lights, Nemo was there with a clipboard. He told me they collected ample samples and that I'd be monitored for the next hour. He also mentioned compensation, double what I'd expected, and said I'd get an extra payment if I filled out a survey about my recovery. I was woozy enough to agree, buoyed by the idea that this was all for the greater good. In the days that followed, I felt bruised and drained. My abdomen throbbed, I had bouts of spotting, and I spent entire afternoons in bed. Nemo called daily, checking on my symptoms, urging me to rest and take painkillers. He said this was normal recovery, and that my chart would help refine protocols so future participants had smoother experiences. He even sent me get well flowers, calling it participant care. I believed every word. This was important research, and I was contributing something vital. Then I saw a flyer taped to a bulletin board in another department. Paid egg donors needed for private IVF clinic. It listed a website that looked familiar. Out of curiosity, I clicked through and found profiles of young women, some with photos I recognized from the lab directory, and a breakdown of fees that matched exactly what Nemo had paid me. Beneath each profile was detailed medical data, hormone levels, ultrasound images, even personal notes about body mass index and recovery times. My heart lurched when I saw my own name and data printed there without any shield or pseudonym. I called Nemo. He answered on the first ring, smooth and reassuring. I blurted out, "Why is my information on that site?" He said it was part of a collaboration with the clinic, that academic transparency required sharing anonymized data. He claimed they scrubbed names, but my details were too specific to be random. I demanded to know where my eggs had gone. He hesitated, then said the clinic might use them for future patients or for further genetic research. He emphasized that donors couldn't specify the ultimate use. It sounded plausible until the line went silent. My next call to the university's research ethics board got me nowhere. They said my consent form covered external partnerships, but admitted the wording was vague. Check with Nemo's supervisor, they suggested. I emailed the lab head, no reply. Panic settled in. I felt hollow, like someone had pried out a part of me and left an ache behind. I spent nights scrolling through fertility forums and legal blogs, piecing together stories of women who donated eggs only to find their genetic material used in unregulated clinics or sold across borders. I discovered that some private IVF centers paid higher fees but had less oversight. The more I read, the more I realized Nemo had steered me toward the same path, hitting my consent under the guise of study, then funneling my eggs to a clinic unchecked. I tried confronting Nemo in person. I showed up at the campus lab unannounced, seething but determined. He greeted me with that same calm smile and ushered me into his office, walls lined with research awards and framed posters. I slammed the flyer on his desk and asked him to explain. He leaned back, folded his arms, and said, "This is the real world of reproductive medicine. Research doesn't exist in a vacuum." He told me he was entitled to share specimens with partners and that compensation structures were standard. When I asked what would happen to my genetic lineage, he brushed it off. "You're just helping science." I felt rage boil over. I remembered signing a form that never mentioned clinics or IVF, only non-surgical retrieval. I demanded my eggs back, an absurd request I knew but I had to try. Nemo sighed and said it was irreversible was collected. Any hope of reversal was gone. He suggested I file a complaint with the Human Fertilization Authority, but warned that such proceedings could take years and likely end in deadlock. "Your case isn't unique," he said, as if that should comfort me. The weight of it pressed down. I'd lost not only my eggs but my sense of bodily autonomy. Everything about my health decisions now felt tainted. I reported the incident to the university press office, which launched an internal probe, but months later, their statement read that Nemo acted within the scope of approved protocols. They closed the case, citing ambiguity in the consent documentation. I found myself waking up in the middle of the night, heart hammering, haunted by the idea that a piece of me existed somewhere in a medical freezer, waiting for a stranger to request it. I stopped volunteering for any study, stopped answering calls from blocked numbers. I even switched doctors, terrified of running into someone connected to that lab network. I joined an online support group for donors who felt exploited. Their stories varied. Some had better outcomes, some worse, but we shared a need to reclaim agency over our bodies. Recovery wasn't just physical. I went to therapy, unpacking every moment of blind trust I'd placed in Nemo's lab coat and research talk. I learned to read consent forms like a contract lawyer, to ask pointed questions about data sharing and specimen use. I talk now about informed consent as if I'm spelling out a mantra. Be specific. Get details in writing. Know where your cells will end up. Sometimes I catch myself scanning clinics for hidden cameras, flinching at every mention of donor cycles. Trust is a low-burning ember I struggle to reignite. Yet life moves on. I found a new passion in advocacy, volunteering with a nonprofit pushing for tighter fertility regulations. I channel that anger into policy petitions and awareness campaigns. It doesn't bring my eggs back, but it reminds me that the power of my story can help protect others from a similar blind spot. There was no dramatic courtroom showdown, no final gotcha moment. Just the suppression of my own hope by someone who knew exactly how to cloak intention and legalese. I still had to trust hundreds in maintenance fees just for holding my ghost of an estate. I locked away that leather-bound notebook, bought a new one, and filled it with personal reminders. Question every clause, read every line, trust your instincts more than persuasive smiles. And if I ever see a law seminar advertised again, I'll sign up, but this time, I'll keep my wallet in my pocket. That afternoon, the basement of the community center smelled like stale coffee and hope. Chairs were arranged in a circle under flickering fluorescent lights, and a banner on the wall proclaimed, "Unlock your potential." I wandered in because I'd seen an ad for a self-help group promising to help me finally figure out what I wanted out of life. When Nairobi introduced herself, she radiated confidence, her voice smooth, her laughter easy. She had this way of leaning in so you felt like she was your only audience. Over the next few weeks, I showed up every Tuesday. Nairobi spoke about finding your tribe and aligning your energy. She passed around sticky notes, had us write down what we wanted to manifest, then asked for volunteers to share. Every time I spoke, she nodded and said, "That's exactly why you're here. You're ready for transformation." I felt seen in a way I hadn't before. It gave me a rush, like I was on the verge of something big. Then she invited me to a smaller meetup at her apartment. I arrived to find a handful of other group regulars gathered around her coffee table. There were snacks, herbal tea, and soft music playing. She said she wanted to share the next level of the program, an exclusive network of change agents who would coach newcomers and earn a commission for every referral. It sounded harmless, even exciting. She painted it as a chance to build confidence, develop leadership skills, and make some extra cash. It started innocently. I posted about the group on my social feeds, telling my friends it was a life-changing experience. They asked about it, I invited them to the next Tuesday session, and a couple of them came. At first, Everything was fine, big smiles, shared affirmations, herbal blends that smelled like lavender honey. But after a few weeks, Nairobi called me in private and said, "You know who really gets the most out of this? People who fully commit. If you're serious about your growth, you need to free up space, emotionally and socially, to focus on our mission." She suggested I take a break from negative influences. She didn't name names, but she said that some of my friends had low vibrational energy and that keeping them close would hold me back. I felt a pain in my chest remembering movie nights and inside jokes. But Nairobi's tone was matter of fact, like she was pointing out a cracked window in an otherwise perfect house. I wrote in my journal that night, "Is this too much?" But the next day, my friends texted asking why I hadn't replied. I brushed it off as me being busy with the program. Week after week, the list of negative influences grew. Someone who teased me about being too serious, a friend who questioned the network's legitimacy. Nairobi would pull me aside after group, showing charts of my engagement score, and tell me my friends were dragging my numbers down. She said, "You're meant for more, but they're anchors." I started canceling plans. I stopped picking up calls. My phone felt lighter without their memes and late night rants about heartbreak. In their place came private coaching calls with Nairobi, monthly recruiter workshops, and a Slack channel she managed for all the top performers. The channel was alive 24/7. People boasting about recruiting new members, celebrating their commissions, posting motivational mantras with burning suns and ascending arrows. I dove in, convinced that the more I disconnected from my old life, the closer I got to my true self. I felt like I found my purpose. Then the money aspect started shaking me. I found my bank statements riddled with small deductions labeled network fee or leadership workshop. The fees were only £20 at a time, but they happened every week. When I mentioned it in the Slack channel, someone posted, "Invest in yourself. Every pound you pay is an investment in your future." If your circle doesn't understand that, they're not real supporters. I closed my eyes and typed thanks under the comment, my stomach twisting. One evening, I tried reaching out to one of my old friends, Sarah, to grab coffee. I got no reply. A few days later, I met Sarah by chance at the supermarket. She glanced away when she saw me. I said, "Hey, I missed you." She said, "I don't know you anymore." It felt like someone had punched me in the gut. I walked away with my head spinning, pushing a cart full of groceries I didn't really need. That night, I couldn't sleep. My Slack notifications pinged at me every few minutes. People celebrating another recruit, planning a regional meetup. I thought about the text threads with my closest friends, now frozen on unanswered messages. I realized I hadn't heard from my family in nearly a month. They'd say something if they were worried, right? The next day, I showed up early at the community center's Tuesday meeting, intending to ask Nairobi for clarity. Instead, I found the room nearly empty. A notice on the door said the group had been moved online due to operational enhancements. I felt a strange relief at not seeing all those circle chairs and sticky notes. I sat alone on a bench outside, scrolling through the Slack channel on my phone. I noticed a message from Nairobi. "New members are joining at an incredible rate. Let's keep up the momentum." My thumb hovered over the screen. I felt ashamed. I logged out. The rest of the day I wandered through the city, trying to remember who I was before this. I called my roommate, who answered on the second ring. She was worried and relieved to hear from me. We met at a cafe, and for the first time in weeks, I laughed at her antics. She told me how concerned they'd all been, how I'd gone from being their partner in crime to a ghost posting motivational quotes on random Slack channels. I felt tears prick my eyes. When I got home, I opened my laptop and deleted the network's Slack app. I went through my bank statements and disputed each network fee. My bank said they'd investigate, and I started to feel some control returning. I wrote a long apology email to my friends, explaining that I'd let myself get pulled in and that I was sorry for cutting them off. Every line of the message felt heavy, but I hit send. That night, messages started popping up. Sarah sent a gif of two cartoon cats hugging. Another friend sent a voice note. "Missed you tons, let's catch up." It felt like waking up from a bad dream. I fell into bed exhausted, but it was a relief. Maybe fixing this would take time, but at least I was back in my own life. A week later, I showed up at the community center on Tuesday. The banner was gone, replaced by a novice for a piano lesson class. I thought about Nairobi and her tribe, her energy alignment, and her relentless recruitment drive. I realized that the most important tribe I'd ever had was the one I'd known all along. The people who told me the truth, even when it hurt. I haven't gone back to those self-help meetings, and I don't plan to. Instead, I signed up for a pottery class across town, something totally unrelated to networking or manifestation metrics. I felt nervous, but it was my choice, no one else's. As I ducked my fingers into the clay on the first day, I smiled at the lump of earth forming under my palms. It reminded me that real growth is messy, takes time, and belongs to you alone. I wandered into the city's waterfront district because I saw flyers plastered on lampposts for Halsey's annual charity marathon, Run for Health, Run for Hope. I only run when chased, but the idea of running alongside hundreds of strangers, all pounding the pavement for a cause, felt electric. I signed up on a whim, dropped 10 pounds on the registration fee, and convinced my roommate to cheer me on at the finish line. Race day felt like a festival. Stalls lining the promenade handed out energy bars, branded water bottles, and brightly colored wristbands. Volunteers in Halsey t-shirts gave out high fives and cheered as people stretched in clumps. There was live music, balloon arches, even a drone capturing overhead shots of the crowd. I was surprised by how professional it all looked for a charity run. Ahead of me, a man waved a sign that said Team Sunshine, and another group held up a banner reading Kids Futures Matter. I felt proud to be part of something that big. Before the start, each runner scanned a QR code on their bib and downloaded the Halsey Fit app. It promised to track our distance, pace, heart rate, and here's the fun twist, personal preference insights based on our demographics. I tapped through the permissions, agreeing to let it access my contact list, my camera for live selfies, and my microphone to catch crowd cheers. I wanted every cool feature, so I checked the boxes without thinking twice. The gun went off, and we surged forward. The app buzzed in my pocket every kilometer, announcing my split times and telling me to smile for the camera. I waved at the drone as it hovered overhead, grinning into the lens. Along the route, volunteers held up huge boards showing our names and hometowns. Go Lucy from Stratford, which felt like a virtual high five from strangers. I soaked it in, feeling like I was part of something memorable. A week later, I got a push notification. See your race highlights. It opened a slick video montage of my run, clips of me lacing up, crossing the start line, gasping up the final hill, and pumping my fist at the finish. The screen flashed some stats, my top speed, calories burned, VO2 max estimate, and something labeled cultural affinity score. It said I scored highest in urban art appreciation and world cuisines, and lowest in classical music taste. Beneath that was a section called Community Insights, showing I was likely aligned with runners from certain ethnic and cultural backgrounds. It all felt harmlessly fun, kind of like a social media quiz come to life. Then the ads started. Sponsored posts filled my feed for streetwear brands targeting diverse markets, local venues offering authentic cultural experiences, and a series of recommendation pop-ups nudging me to join private online groups focused on racial justice discussions. At first, I thought the app was just cleverly matching ads to my cultural affinity score. But the more I saw, the weirder it got. Invitation links to private Telegram channels promising unfiltered community talk, ads for extremist-sounding websites using phrases like true cultural purity, and targeted messages from fringe political blogs. One afternoon, I got a message on Instagram from a handle I didn't recognize. Saw you ran the Halsey for Hope marathon. We're building a local network for those who scored high on community advocacy. Interested. The profile had no picture and only 2 followers. I blocked them immediately, but when I checked my email, I saw Halsey had sent me a community follow-up survey. It asked for my age, gender, race, religion, political leanings, and neighborhood. There was a subtle checkbox at the bottom granting permission to use data for partner outreach. I'd filled it out thinking it was to gauge donor satisfaction, never imagining it meant handing over my sensitive attribute data. Panic set in. I realized the app had monitored my running road, my hydration breaks, my cheering crowd reactions, and then combined that with demographic info to paint a picture of what motivates Lucy. That profile sold in bulk was a gold mine for anyone wanting to micro-target people by race and belief. I dug up Halsey's privacy policy and found vague language about sharing anonymized insights with sponsors and partners. It mentioned community groups, but never warned about extremist organizations. I called Halsey's support line. A cheery representative named Jordan told me the data was used only for health and well-being research, and that community partner outreach was strictly vetted. When I pressed about the extremist ads, Jordan said the third-party networks they used sometimes slipped through unwanted content, but Halsey was improving filters. I hung up feeling like I'd spoken to a robot that knew how to sound sympathetic without offering any real solution. Determined to cut losses, I deleted the app and emailed Halsey demanding they erase my data. They replied with a form letter. Your request is being processed. Please allow 30 days. Meanwhile, unsolicited invites and ads kept rolling in. My social feeds looked like a fringe political rally invitation board. My phone buzzed with messages from accounts I'd never interacted with, praising my cultural affinity and encouraging me to join private chats. The more I tried to scrub my digital footprint, the more I realized the tentacles of that marathon extended into hidden channels I couldn't reach. I talked to a friend who works in tech. She told me the only real way to prevent data sharing was not to share it in the first place. She helped me set up new privacy rules, deleted old accounts, and unsubscribed from Halsey's newsletter. Together, we filed a complaint with the Data Protection Authority, citing unauthorized profiling based on race. The process felt bureaucratic and cold forms, reference numbers, vague acknowledgments, but it was something. While waiting for a response, I joined a local running club that refused to use any tracking tech. We met at dawn, unmonitored, wore plain clothes, and shared our progress at coffee after the run. No logos, no apps, just real conversations. I felt a relief I hadn't known, like stepping out of a carnival ride back onto solid ground. A month later, I got an email from the Data Commission. Halsey had agreed to pay a fine for handling sensitive personal data and would undergo an audit of its data sharing practices. They confirmed they deleted my profile and promised tighter controls. It felt like a small victory, but I knew the damage was done. My information had already leaked into unknown databases. Now, years later, I still get occasional targeted ads that hint at my past community insights. I've learned to treat every QR code with suspicion, to ask what happens to my data, and to run marathons in real life, not through an app. When I jog past the waterfront, the finish line arch is gone, replaced by a public sculpture celebrating river conservation. I smile at the runners passing by, no bibs, no apps, just faces and footsteps. And I'm thankful that sometimes the simplest race is the one you run without leaving a digital trace. The first time I saw Hina, it was a late-night open mic in a converted warehouse near the river. The stage lights were dim, and the crowd leaned in to catch every word from poets and singers. I was nursing a cold brew when she slid onto the stool next to me and ordered a chamomile tea. Her voice was quiet but carried a strange intensity, like she was rehearsing every phrase in her head. I caught snippets of her conversation with the bartender. She spoke about a vision for a better world, one where every person lived within a strict moral code. It sounded intriguing, like I'd stumbled on some underground movement. Over the next few weeks, I ran into her at readings and art shows. She spoke passionately about her community's mission to foster purity of mind and body. She quoted philosophy texts, sprinkled her speech with phrases like collective harmony and ideological integrity. I was drawn to her conviction. On a rainy Thursday, she invited me to a small gathering at her flat to discuss the next phase of their project. I agreed, curious to learn more. Her apartment was minimalist, every surface spotless, and every book aligned perfectly on the shelves. She served herbal tea and spoke about her belief that true commitment meant eliminating distractions. She didn't name them at first, but she hinted that physical factors could undermine ideological dedication. I laughed when she said it lightly, saying she thought it was odd when people brought unnecessary burdens into their community. It felt theoretical until she asked if I wanted to be part of her inner circle. By the next month, I was attending workshops in her living room every Tuesday. We studied texts on communal living, took quizzes on moral scenarios, and shared personal testimonies. After each session, she leaned in close and asked, "Are you willing to go all the way?" I assumed she meant fully immersing in study, but she looked me in the eye with a seriousness that made my skin prickle. One evening, she passed around a pamphlet titled Ensuring Future Purity. It described a radical proposal: members would voluntarily undergo sterilization surgery to remove any biological temptation that could conflict with the group's values. In her words, it was the ultimate sacrifice for ideological alignment. The pamphlet used measured language, talked about safety protocols, medical partnerships, and recovery timelines. There were testimonials from anonymous members who claimed they felt liberated afterward. I felt nauseous reading it, but I couldn't look away. She spoke calmly, saying that without the risk of unwanted consequences, members could devote themselves entirely to the cause. I asked about regrets, medical risks, or long-term effects. She said all concerns were addressed, that the procedures were performed by trusted practitioners, and that aftercare was provided by caring community nurses. She smiled and added, "If you truly believe in our vision, this is the final step." I left her flat feeling like I'd fallen off a cliff. I sat in my car in the rain, staring at the flyer until water blurred the words. The idea of surgery terrified me, but part of me understood the logic. Eliminate biological distractions and focus on higher purpose. Still, I told her I needed time. She nodded, handed me a slip of paper with the clinic's address, and said, "Reach out when you're ready." Over the next days, I couldn't concentrate. I replayed our talks, felt the lure of belonging clash with the dread of surrendering my body. Hina texted daily, asking if I'd made a decision. She said the next intake session was in 2 weeks. Her persistence felt gentle at first, then urgent, like she was layering pressure under the guise of concern. I began to retreat from friends, cancel dates, and skip my yoga classes because she told me distractions could muddy my thinking. One night, I found myself back at the warehouse open mic, hoping the familiar pulse of live voices would clear my head. Instead, she was there, waiting in the shadows, her chamomile tea in hand. She smiled and said, "This choice isn't for everyone, but for those meant to lead, it's essential." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I felt a mixture of comfort and alarm, as if her touch was official permission to cross a line I couldn't uncross. The next day, I visited the clinic. It was tucked behind an unmarked door in an office building. Inside, a nurse in scrubs led me to a consultation room. I glanced around at equipment that looked half medical, half religious retreat. The nurse reviewed my health history, then asked if I was certain. She spoke about the procedure's reversibility as if it were a side note. I felt my throat tighten. When she offered me a brochure on fertility preservation, freezing eggs in case I changed my mind, I asked for it reflexively, then wondered why she suggested it, if the point was permanence. I left without scheduling. That night, my phone exploded with messages from Hina. Did it go well? Don't rush. Choose commitment. We believe in you. I felt trapped. Her words blurred between faithful encouragement and manipulation. I began to question every motive, hers, mine, and the nurse's. A week later, I found the clinic's address erased from my notes. I couldn't bring myself to call. I called my doctor instead, pretending it was for a friend, and asked about sterilization. He was shocked I considered it and warned of permanent consequences, hormonal imbalance, and psychological impact. He talked me through the risks in stark terms, no sugarcoating, no idealistic framing. I left his office feeling raw but relieved. Someone had named the fear instead of glossing over it. I emailed Hina saying I wasn't ready. She replied with a single word, "Understood." The relief was immediate, but also strangely empty, as though I disappointed her and, by extension, the community I thought I belonged to. I deleted her number and avoided the warehouse, convinced I needed space to rediscover my own voice. In the following weeks, I reconnected with old friends. We sat in cafes, talked about work frustrations, and laughed at the absurdity of midnight pizza runs. I resumed my yoga practice, hiked in the hills, and journaled about what felt like obsessive thoughts. Slowly, I realized I'd almost traded my autonomy for the promise of a perfect mind. I felt ashamed for nearly giving in. One morning, I went past the warehouse and peeked through the window. Empty chairs waited under dim lights, and someone had taped a new poster on the wall advertising mindfulness seminars. I thought about how easily places can hold different energies over time. I walked on. I never joined any further gatherings or clinics. Instead, I started volunteering at a local mental health hotline, answering calls from people wrestling with life-altering choices. I listened without judgment, offered information, and reminded callers that clarity comes from honest questions, not from silencing doubts. Sometimes, after a shift, I find myself back at the riverside, watching the water flow and feeling grateful that my own current never took me to a point of no return. The wound of that invitation still aches, knowing how near I came to a decision I wasn't equipped to make. But I learned that true commitment to an ideology doesn't demand the sacrifice of your body. Real strength comes from the ability to question, to pause, and to choose the path that honors your own boundaries. And when I think about that story, I remember that the greatest act of conviction is standing firm in the face of pressure, not yielding to the promise of perfection. That Friday evening, the hotel bar at the finance conference was pulsing with energy. Glassy marble floors, low-lit chandeliers, the hum of dealmakers trading business cards over martinis. I'd planned to duck in for a quick drink between panels, then head back to my room to crash. Instead, I spotted Kane leaning against the bar, laughing at something on his phone. His tailored suit fit like it was made for him, his ease with the crowd impossible to ignore. When he caught my eye, he offered a genuine smile and raised his glass. I ended up slipping onto the stool next to him, trading my panel notes for his insider anecdotes about hedge funds and equity trends. He told me he worked at a boutique investment firm, specializing in off-market opportunities. He spoke casually about high-stakes deals and under-the-radar stock picks, making it sound like weekend golf talk. I mentioned my side project, a small online shop I was trying to grow, and he gave me a tip on fractional shares I could buy to hedge my risks. I felt a spark of connection, as if we were two puzzle pieces from different worlds clicking together. We swapped numbers before the bar closed, and I went to bed buzzing, the sound of his laughter still echoing. A week later, Kane texted to say he'd be in my city and invited me to dinner. I agreed, expecting a formal business dinner, but he chose a cozy bistro with soft lighting and mismatched chairs. Over risotto and red wine, we talked about everything except work, our favorite travel spots, childhood ambitions, and guilty pleasure playlists. His attention made me relax in a way I hadn't in months. When he walked me to my car, he brushed my hand and said, "Let's do this again soon." I agreed before my mind caught up. Our dates continued over the next month. Jazz nights in din lounges, art gallery openings with complimentary champagne, and walks through late-night food markets. Between dates, his texts arrived like little gifts. Photos of early morning skyline views from his office, screenshots of promising market dips with notes like "thought of you." I pinned those notes to my phone's home screen, feeling proud that someone so savvy cared enough to share insights. Then he began to weave investing advice into our conversations. After one particularly thrilling day at work, he suggested we open a joint trading account. He said it would make it easier for him to show me trades in real time, like a team. The idea of sharing something so intimate felt exciting, like we were leveling up our relationship. We met at a co-working cafe, and he pulled out documents that looked official: joint investment agreement, authorized trader signature, and a list of account permissions. He framed it as a relationship exercise in building trust. I signed, trusting the man who'd been so generous with his time and expertise. The joint account was set up under a firm's name, but in our two names. Kane deposited some funds, then invited me to fund my portion. I transferred money from my savings, more than I planned, but I told myself it was part of growing together. He walked me through the trading platform on his laptop, showing me how to place buy and sell orders. For a few weeks, I watched our balance tick upward as his picks yielded moderate gains. I felt validated every time the account grew, believing that love and finance could bloom hand in hand. Then he messaged me one morning, "New private placement opportunity. Exclusive window opens tomorrow. Minimum buy-in is 20,000. Let me know if you're in." My stomach twisted. Our joint account had to run half that amount. I hesitated, thinking of my rent and emergency fund. He called me, his voice warm. "We're in this together. I'll cover half." I closed my eyes and imagined us as partners, building wealth and memories side by side. I agreed, and he transferred the extra funds from a shell account and told me to wire my share. That evening, I sent the money. Kane texted back immediately, "Got it. Welcome aboard." In my head, I pictured a future of shared returns and weekend getaways paid for by savvy investments. But as days passed, there was no news on the placement, just the usual delays in private deals. I asked Kane about updates, and he reassured me that FDA approval for some biotech firm or a regulatory nod was imminent. Every time I expressed worry, he soothed me. Patience is part of the game. Good things come to those who wait. I started checking our joint account obsessively. When I saw the balance frozen, dipped lower than before, I felt a rising panic. His texts became less frequent. One night, I opened a laptop to see the firm's login page gone, replaced by a site under maintenance notice. My heart pounded as I tried to dial him. Straight to voicemail. I messaged, "What's going on? I need answers." No reply. I called my bank. They told me the transfer went to an account that didn't match the firm's registered details. My funds had been funneled to a private offshore shell. The realization hit me like cold rain. I gave my savings to someone who'd used our relationship as cover. I stared at the ceiling for hours, replaying every date and champagne toast, wondering how I'd been so blind. I confronted Kane in person a week later. We met at our bistro, the one that felt so intimate. I demanded my money back. He looked at me with an apologetic shrug and said, "I told you it was high risk. You knew the rules." He handed me a statement showing my signature on the joint account agreement, complete with a clause allowing variable capital calls and cancellation restrictions. I felt a wave of betrayal. The love story we'd been crafting revealed itself as a scripted con. I tried every channel, calls, texts, emails, but he disappeared. He activated his profile on all our favorite apps and cut off his local cell number. I contacted the financial regulator and filed a complaint, but they warned me that money wired offshore was almost impossible to recover. My savings were gone. The emergency fund I'd built was emptied. Dinner dates with candlelight became painful memories of trusting him. In the aftermath, I moved out of the apartment we'd shared some dates in and stayed with my sister. I paused any further dating, hunched over my laptop late into the night, drafting spreadsheets of my dwindling budget. I read everything I could about online romance scams, about how fraudsters play on emotional bonds to exploit victims. I realized that love and finance can be a dangerous mix when someone knows how to manipulate both. Slowly, I started rebuilding. I found a new part-time gig editing market reports and stashed away small amounts from each paycheck. When I felt the urge to dive into another relationship, I held back until I could vet every financial suggestion. I joined a support group of people who'd faced similar betrayals. Some had lost far more, but our shared stories helped me process mine. Now, when I think of Kane, I remember the glittering bar lights and the feeling of possibility. I learned that in matters of the heart, the risk of betrayal can be higher than any market gamble. I still date, cautiously, skeptically, with clear boundaries between my bank account and my emotions. And every time someone offers me insider advice and a whisked-away invitation, I remind myself that true connection doesn't require signing a financial agreement. Love should feel safe, not like a high-stakes trade. I never thought a simple Friday afternoon coffee could turn into the most confusing 2 months of my life. I spotted her at the counter, jeans and a faded hoodie, hair pulled back in that effortless way that makes you think someone spent hours styling it. She smiled when I asked if the seat next to her was free, and from that moment, it felt like we were on the same wavelength. I didn't see the warning signs, or if I did, I brushed them off as quirks. I was mesmerized by how easy she was to talk to. Those first few weeks flew by in a blur of midweek dinners and late-night drives. We'd cruise down city streets, the windows rolled down so her laugh could ride on the breeze. She claimed she worked irregular hours at a design studio, but never wanted to show me photos of her projects or meet her coworkers. I thought it was just privacy. We'd binge-watch old movies on my couch, her head resting on my shoulder, and she'd fall asleep before the end credits. I felt needed, trusted, special. Every time she dodged a question about weekends, I told myself she was busy with family or catching up on errands. When she mentioned weekend plans without inviting me, I shrugged it off. I figured she valued her alone time. It wasn't until week 6 that I noticed odd things. Calls she'd take behind closed doors, hushed voices, moments when she'd look screenward and tense up. I asked if everything was okay. She said yes, but I caught a flicker in her eyes. That should have set off alarm bells, but by then I couldn't help but trust her. By week 8, we were inseparable. She met my friends, and they adored her easy charm. We cooked pasta in my cramped kitchen and danced in socks on the tiled floor. I'd fetch groceries while she whipped up something delicious with spices I'd never heard of. She'd send me photos of her cat Milo, curled up in patches of sunlight, and I'd send back goofy selfies. It felt comfortable, like we'd been paired by fate. I thought we were building something real. Then came the day I found the wedding ring. I'd gone to her apartment to surprise her with flowers, but her door was slightly ajar. I stepped in, calling her name, and froze when I saw on the coffee table an ornate band set with tiny diamonds. I picked it up and turned it over, heart pounding. On the rug behind her sofa lay a framed photo of her, grinning alongside a man and two small kids. The date on the back said 2017. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I left her place without a word, clutching the ring like proof of some sick joke. When she called 20 minutes later, I didn't answer. She showed up at my door an hour later, looking frantic, and I laid it all out. She didn't deny it. She sighed, then walked me through a story I wished I'd never heard. They'd been married for years, 2 kids under 7, and their marriage was open. Her husband thought it would spice things up, he said. They agreed she could date, as long as it didn't interfere with family time. I was apparently part of an experiment to test his jealousy. I felt a rush of every emotion at once. Anger, betrayal, humiliation. How could she play me like that? She rambled on about how it wasn't personal, how she cared for me in her own way, how none of it was supposed to hurt. I could almost see the panic in her eyes, like she feared losing control of her own story. But I wasn't an ingredient in her marriage cocktail. I was just a prop. She explained that her husband would text her updates when I seemed too invested, and that he'd been watching to see if he could still rouse jealousy. They'd whispered about it late at night, thinking no one else would notice. She said she felt guilty, but also curious about how it would all go. I could feel my face flush as I realized every date, every inside joke, every moment of comfort had been under their microscope. I asked why she never told me. Her answer was that it would ruin the experiment. She thought I'd bail the moment I learned the truth. Maybe she was right. I felt like an idiot for not seeing the clues sooner. The sketchy scheduling, the half answers, the excuses. All of it had lined up, and I had been too blinded by the thrill of someone paying attention to me. We sat in my living room for hours. She tried to justify it, saying people in open marriages do stuff like this all the time. I realized then that she wasn't really listening to me. She was just reciting her rehearsed lines. I wanted to shake her to demand sincerity, but I knew it was pointless. What I thought was real had been orchestrated. Nothing she said could fix that. When she left, I didn't hug her, didn't reach for the door to stop her. I watched her walk down my hallway, shoulders slumped as if she finally understood the wreckage behind her. I closed the door and sank onto the floor, staring at the ring on the coffee table. It was too heavy to hold. I slid it into a drawer and I shut it tight, deciding I'd deal with it later. In the days after, I deleted her number, erased our texts, threw out the small gifts she left behind. I couldn't bring myself to keep anything that reminded me of those 2 months. I stopped going to that coffee shop, took a different route home, and refused every friend's attempt to set me up with someone else. I wasn't ready to trust. I spent evenings replaying our conversations, realizing how scripted so many of them had been. Eventually, I started talking again, called buddies to hang out, talked about the absurdity of it all. I even made fun of myself for letting someone use me like a lab rat. But the scar remained a reminder that I wasn't as smart as I liked to think. It changed how I saw relationships, trust, everything. I used to believe that if something felt right, it just was right. Now I know that even the most comfortable moments can hide something ugly. So here I am months later, sitting at a different coffee shop, watching strangers spin in their own stories. I catch myself scanning every profile picture, wondering if there's some hidden clause written in invisible ink. I remind myself to breathe and give people a chance. But I can't help remembering Kate's ring and the way she looked at me when I caught her in the lie. That look is burned into my mind, equal parts guilt and curiosity. I hope I never see it again. It started on a Tuesday when I noticed something off about his laugh. We were sprawled on my living room floor, surrounded by pizza boxes and empty cans. And he laughed this little too perfectly, like someone clicking play on a soundbite. I didn't say anything, just chalked it up to him being extra into the show we were binge watching. At that point, I was clueless he was already recording me. We met at a mutual friend's rooftop party 2 weeks before. He leaned against the rail, sun setting behind him, telling me about some indie video game he was developing. His voice was soft but confident, and I thought I'd hit the jackpot when he asked for my number. For the next 3 weeks, we were inseparable. Impromptu bike rides to the river, late-night fast food runs, random trivia contests in dingy bars. He was fun, goofy, always up for something spontaneous. He'd pull out his phone to capture a selfie or shoot video of us doing stupid challenges. I never hesitated to pose because it felt natural and harmless. About a week in, I noticed his phone would stay propped on the coffee table, camera lens aimed right at me, even when we weren't taking pictures. Whenever I asked what he was filming, he said he was testing a new mount for steady footage. He really wanted to document our adventures. I shrugged it off. Who doesn't want memories captured? He convinced me he'd delete anything I didn't like. I believed him. He had a little studio in his apartment, a room with neon lights and posters of classic games. He'd invite me over to record reaction videos or gameplay streams. Sometimes he'd go off to tweak lighting, and I'd chat with his roommate about music or the annoying landlord. I never thought twice about privacy. He made it all sound so professional, so normal for someone in his line of work. By week 3, I was head over heels. We were planning a weekend getaway to the mountains, laughing about who would get lost first on the hiking trails. Then came the slip up. I went to his place to pick him up for dinner and found Discord notifications popping up on the screen. Tiny icons with messages saying things like new rating submitted and topic. Tonight state. I felt my stomach drop. I clicked around, found a private server with a handful of guys I didn't know. Each channel was labeled by date, with subchannels for behavior, looks, and entertainment value. There were clips of me picking at my nails, adjusting my hair, telling a dumb joke that he must have captured earlier. I scrolled through the channels, stunned. One friend had posted a short reel of me laughing, followed by a poll, score her charm from 1 to 10. Another video showed me yawning mid-conversation. Someone had commented kind of cute but too lazy. I wanted to throw up. The worst part was seeing myself on screen, oblivious, while these guys rated my every move like I was an item on an auction block. He burst into the room, phone in hand, and gave me that look someone reserves for a surprise dog. He tried to explain it away as research for user feedback, like I was part of some grand social experiment. He said his friends were all developers and content creators, and they exchanged clips to improve their on-camera performance. He swore he never meant to hurt me, that he cared about how I felt. I stood there, arms shaking, staring at his screen as he clicked through more clips. None of it made sense. 3 weeks of dates, inside jokes, sleepy-eyed mornings, and it was all fodder for his private show. Every time I'd snorted at a bad pun, every time I'd fretted about my hair in the wind, it had been recorded. I thought he was capturing memories. He'd never told me those memories were going into a group chat where strangers critiqued me behind my back. I asked why he didn't just tell me. He said he figured I'd freak out and cut him off if I knew. He insisted it was harmless, that other people's relationships used similar feedback loops. I realized then how little he respected me. He was so obsessed with his own little world that he turned my life into content. I wanted to scream at him, to tear his phone apart, but I couldn't find the words. Everything felt surreal, like I was trapped in some twisted reality show. I left his apartment without even grabbing my jacket. On the street, I called a friend and stumbled through the story, voice cracking. She told me to go somewhere safe, so I hopped on a bus back home, phone clenched tight. I sat on my couch for hours, scrolling through the server on my laptop until my eyes burned. I watched every clip and read every comment, each one chipping away at my sense of self. It wasn't the harshest words that hurt most. It was the casual cruelty, the way everyone treated me like a character instead of a person. The next morning, I sent him a text that said simply, "Don't ever contact me again." I pressed send and stared at my phone, heart pounding. I deleted his number, blocked him on social media, and purged the Discord app. I vowed to never date someone with a streaming channel again. I felt foolish for letting it happen, but part of me wondered how I hadn't seen the red flags. Maybe the perfect dates, the shared playlists, the inside jokes were just part of his act. In the days that followed, I tried to stitch myself back together. I met friends for brunch, laughed at jokes that didn't involve cameras or ratings. I deleted apps and accounts that reminded me of that digital nightmare. I realized I'd been so excited about being special that I ignored the moments where he seemed more invested in filming than listening. I replayed scenes in my mind, like the time I explained my weird obsession with origami, and he pivoted to setting up a tripod for a close-up shot of my hands. A month later, I'm getting back to normal. I'm back on my bike, riding trails at dawn, not worrying about who's filming. I'm swiping casually, chatting without sending photos until I know someone's legit. I'm grateful for the lesson, though it stung like hell. Sometimes I still get frantic images of those clips scrolling on a screen, but I push them away. I deserve to be more than a rating. I deserve real, unfiltered moments, and this time I'll make sure no one's secretly recording them. I could still taste the salt in the air when I first spotted her across the boardwalk, sketchbook in hand and wind-tossed hair. It was one of those late summer evenings when the sky bleeds pink into orange and the sea hums like a distant engine. I was there with a friend, neither of us expecting much beyond overpriced fries and ocean views, when she looked up and caught my eye. She gave that half smile that makes you wonder if you're imagining things. I went over, we started talking about the sunset, and just like that, I was hooked. Our first few weeks were pure spontaneity. We'd be at that boardwalk kiosk and handing me a strawberry smoothie while she showed me her latest doodles, tiny seahorses and seashells that somehow captured more life than any photograph. Then we'd wander onto the sand, feet sinking into damp grains, and watch rollerbladers zip by. She never talked about her past relationships, always changing the subject if I asked. At first, I thought it was cute, like she was a mystery to be unraveled. I didn't realize I was the one getting tangled. She had this habit of tagging along to my family's barbecues. My mom adored her. She raved about how poised and clever she was, always asking about my college courses and my little brother's soccer games. My brother, Jake, just rolled his eyes every time she complimented him on his free kicks. I thought it was casual teasing. It was easy to picture her fitting into my world. Our dates were a mix of lazy mornings and late night drives to wherever. We'd blast old school hip hop, windows down, singing at the top of our lungs until we'd both laugh, so hard we could barely breathe. She'd lean her head back, eyes closed, the glow of dashboard lights casting shadows on her face. In those moments, it felt like the rest of the world vanished. Then came the subtle things I didn't catch at the time, like when I mentioned my brother's name too many times, and she'd stiffen, forcing a smile before dropping the subject. Or the way she glanced at her phone whenever I brought up family vacations. I chalked it up to her guarding her privacy. I never imagined she was guarding a grudge. By week 5, I was falling fast. I'd text her silly memes first thing in the morning, hoping to be the first face she saw. She'd reply with quirky GIS, and I'd grin at my screen like a kid. She'd send me snapshots of her painting projects. Abstract swirls of color she said represented the chaos after our breakup. I told her I loved the pieces, but part of me wondered if the breakup she painted was with me. One afternoon, I went to her apartment to surprise her with concert tickets. She answered the door in ripped jeans and an oversized hoodie, hair up in a messy bun. I held up 2 tickets for this indie band she mentioned loving. She blinked, then threw her arms around me, breathy and grateful. I thought that was our moment. But then her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it too quickly, her expression faltering. I didn't see the message, but the look on her face made me freeze. She stashed the tickets on the kitchen counter and told me to sit down. She said her roommate was having a meltdown and she needed help. I shrugged it off and left, telling myself anything for her art. It wasn't until a week later that the truth spilled out. I was home scrolling through campus group chats when I saw a photo of her laughing next to Jake at a high school reunion. Underneath the caption, "Remember when you ghosted me, loser?" I blinked at the screen. My brother's name was tagged. I messaged Jake, "Hey, is this from you?" He took hours to reply, and when he did, it was a single sentence. "That's Nazia." We dated for a month senior year. My pulse hammered so loud I thought my head would burst. I confronted her that evening outside the cafe where we first met. She rolled her sketchbook into her bag, haze flickering between me and the pavement. She sighed, then launched into a confession I wasn't ready for. Back in high school, she said, Jake and she had what she called a summer fling, mostly texts and late-night calls. Then he faded away, ghosted her like she was nothing. She was hurt and angry. When I showed up weeks ago, she told herself this was her chance to settle the score. I felt my stomach lurch. I had trusted her, believed in the late-night calls and goofy road trips. She told me she danced around the idea, waiting to see how long it took for him to notice her absence from his life. She watched him move on, go to college, and never look back. So when she met me, someone so close to him, she decided to date me on purpose. She said it wasn't malicious, just this weird artistic experiment in revenge. She wanted to see and squirm. I remember the sudden shift in her face, that flicker of triumph, as if she'd scored a point in some twisted game. I stared at her, words stuck in my throat. Everything we'd shared, all laughter and late-night talks, felt cheap, like a rehearsal for some play she'd already written. I wanted to wipe her smile clean, to make her understand how hollow her victory felt to me. She begged me to see it from her perspective, to understand why it mattered. She said she was hurt, that her heart was bruised by being ignored. I did understand that, but that didn't excuse using me as her puppet. I asked why she didn't just talk to me, or to Jake like an adult. She shrugged and said she didn't want sympathy. She wanted revenge. I walked away from her that night under the bruised sky, heading toward the boardwalk where it all began. My legs felt heavy, like I was wading through a dream I couldn't wake up from. I thought of every laugh we shared, every beach sunset we chased. I thought of my brother and how oblivious he'd been. I thought of her sketchbook, now filled with portraits of me, eyes wide in surprise, mouth open in mid-laugh, all the moments she'd captured for this revenge project. When I got home, I deleted her number. I unfollowed her art page. I threw away the concert tickets I'd never use. I tried to make sense of it, as if writing down the events would make them less surreal. It didn't help. Instead, I sat in my bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying her confession like a scratched record, skipping on the same line. In the weeks since I've been awkward around Jake, I haven't told him everything. Part of me feels too embarrassed. He's asked why I ghosted her, and I just mumbled something about distance. Sometimes I catch him watching me concerned. I know he's pieced it together. I figure I'll explain one day. Right now, I'm just trying to keep my head above water. I still go to the beach sometimes, but instead of sketching sunsets, I stare at the horizon, trying to imagine a version of myself that isn't tangled in someone else's drama. I listen to hip-hop on my headphones, windows down in my car, pretending the wind doesn't carry her laughter. I remind myself I'm not a revenge prop, not a sketch she can erase. I'm just me, messy, gullible, but still learning where to draw my boundaries, and I'll never date someone who's got a score to settle again. I never saw it coming. One minute I was swiping through profiles and chuckling at his witty bio, lover of bad puns and midnight taco runs. And the next I was 2 weeks deep in what felt like a movie montage. Texting good morning gifts, spontaneous coffee runs between my lectures, and even a late night karaoke session where he convinced me to belt out that cheesy power ballad. Farouk had this charm, like the universe handed him a megaphone just so everyone could hear his laugh. I was totally on board until the whole thing crashed down around me. It started with his job. He and I both worked at the same tech startup. Me in marketing, him in development, so bumping into him by the snack bar became a regular thing. He'd flash this grin and say, "Need caffeine. I got you." Before I knew it, we were hanging out after hours, brainstorming social media campaigns and quoting sitcom lines. He was good at his job, the kind of guy who could talk code, and then pivot to deep conversation about comic books without missing a beat. I thought that versatility was adorable. But week 2, we were practically glued together. We ate dinner in the break room, shared headphones on long bus rides home, and even studied side by side in the library. Me with my post-its and flashcards, him with his laptop screens full of half-finished apps. He seemed invested in my ideas, genuinely excited when I pitched campaign themes. He'd nod, eyes alight, and toss out suggestions. I started thinking this was it, the one who got me in work and in life. One evening, over tacos at that neon-lit joint down the street, he dropped the bombshell. His ex-girlfriend, who happened to be my coworker in HR, had been particularly vindictive after their breakup. He described a laundry list of petty office pranks, stealing his stapler, rerouting his emails, one time even swapping his coffee with decaf so he'd be half asleep in meetings. He told me he was biding his time, waiting for the right moment to show her how it felt to lose control. I laughed it off, thinking he was just venting. I told him she wouldn't dare, she was too buttoned up. But he winked and said, "Trust me, I've got a plan." In the next few days, I noticed odd things. He'd sit beside me at my desk, lean in as I talked about a private issue, like when I confided in him that my parents were on vacation and I was lonely in my apartment. Then, the next day, I saw her at the water cooler, giving me this tight-lipped smile, as if she knew something I didn't. When I asked her about it later, she acted surprised, said I was imagining it. I shrugged, told myself it was normal office paranoia. By week 3, we'd gone full we're a thing. I'd bring him lunch, he'd bring me random snacks he thought I'd like. I even introduced him to my roommates. He dropped by our flat-warming party with a bag of street food dumplings, and we all bonded over spicy sauce that dripped down our chins. He played guitar by the couch, me singing along off-key because I didn't care. It was that good kind of easy. Then, one day at work, I got called into HR. My stomach flipped. In the small conference room, my coworker sat across from me, clipboard in her lap. She said there had been complaints about inappropriate sharing of confidential information. I blinked. Confidential information. That was me. I thought maybe I'd accidentally forwarded the wrong email. She slid a printed sheet across the table. Snippets of my private text to Farouk. Details about my family finances, my health scare last year. Things I told him in confidence. Her tone was calm but cold. She asked me who had access to my phone. I stuttered that it was just me. When I confronted Farouk that evening, he didn't even flinch. We'd met at a dimly lit bar near the office. He ordered our drinks and winked. I threw the paper at him. Why would you do this? He laughed, set his glass down without spilling a drop. He said his ex was the one who dug out the info, and he strategically used me to extract more. He admitted he'd prompted me to talk about things he knew she wanted, stuff she thought she'd never get her hands on. He bragged that he finally won. I wanted to punch him, but I was too stunned. He told me that every late-night confession, every tear I wiped away after a rough day, had been ammunition. He'd watched my social media, steered conversations toward juicy topics, then passed everything to his ex in HR like a secret weapon. He said he loved the rush of watching her scramble, the way my shocked face became her victory lap. I remember feeling like my insides were on fire, like the worst betrayal you could imagine had just happened in slow motion. I left the bar without a word, walking home in a daze. I replayed all our moments, in listening intently as I talked about my childhood, in focusing on my voice as I recounted embarrassing stories. All of it was bait. I felt sick, used, and completely hollow. My phone buzzed with his texts. Some apology, some smug reminder that he'd set me up perfectly. I ignored every single one. The next morning I called in sick, told my boss I had the flu. I shut myself in my apartment, sprawled on the couch, and let the tears come. I deleted every message from him, wiped my browser history, even changed my passwords. I felt like I had to erase any trace of him from my life to stop the avalanche of anger and shame. I sat there for hours, replaying that moment in HR, wondering if I should take it up the chain or just let it go. Eventually, I decided I wasn't going to be his collateral damage. I drafted an email to HR, detailing everything he'd admitted, how he coaxed me into sharing personal stuff to spite his ex. I attached screenshots of our conversation where he was literally boasting. I pressed send while my heart pounded. That afternoon, I got a response. HR would launch an investigation, and I was encouraged to take some time off. I felt a sliver of relief, like maybe I had a chance to set things right. In the following weeks, the drama exploded. Farouk got called in for questioning. His ex was moved to another department, and our CEO sent a company-wide memo about privacy and trust. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines, half horrified, half vindicated. My coworkers treated me differently, some sympathetically, some awkwardly, as if unsure whether to say hi. I stuck to my work, buried myself in spreadsheets and campaign plans. Sometimes I catch a glimpse of him in the office. He's still there, head down, emailing away like nothing happened. But there's no shine in his grin anymore. He tried to pass me in the hallway once, but I didn't break stride. I keep my eyes forward, pretending he's just another face in a crowd. I've learned to guard my words, to think twice before I mention anything too personal, and to trust that if someone's coaxing me for details, it might not be innocent. Life moved on. I went back to after-work drinks with friends, laughed about stupid memes, even messed up a karaoke verse again without a care. The sting isn't as fresh, but I still feel it sometimes, a pang of disbelief that someone I like could be so callous. Now, when someone asks me about that guy, I shrug and say he was just bad news. I avoid the bars where we went, and I don't swipe right on anyone who mentions deep chats in their bio. I keep my heart locked up tighter, but I'm not shutting it off. I just made a new rule. Sharing is only caring when it's real. I met her in the frozen yogurt aisle of our local supermarket. She was debating between mango and strawberry with an intensity I'd never seen over dessert. I joked that I couldn't lie without strawberry swirl, and she flashed me this grin like we'd been best friends forever. Next thing I knew, she was telling me about her tiny project for her psychology class, and I was nodding along, thinking it was cute. She was so passionate about schoolwork. Those first couple of weeks were a dream. We'd meet at that neon-lit juice bar near campus, her laptop open, me scrolling through my phone, sipping mango banana blends while she typed away on some research paper. She asked me about my majors, my weird college traditions, the time I accidentally set off the fire alarm in my dorm. I spilled all the tea because she made it feel like I was the most interesting person on earth. She'd laugh in all the right spots, ask follow-up questions, and I felt this warm glow whenever she leaned in. Every day felt like a scene from some quirky indie film. We hit up thrift stores hunting for vintage band tees, then swing by the skate park where she'd ride a borrowed board even though she was terrible at it. She claimed it was for behavioral observation. I thought it was adorable that she wanted to study me in action. Afterward, she'd send me a text full of emojis, asking how I felt about the whole experiment. I'd tell her I felt amazing, that I was into her and her research methods. By week 3, I was practically jotting down notes in my own head, thinking about how lucky I was to be part of her project. She'd say things like, "Your body language here is so open," and I'd puff out my chest without thinking. I told my roommates about her class, how her professor was some big shot in dating psychology. They teased me for being her guinea pig. I was fine with that. I liked being the subject. I was flattered that she wanted to study me. Then one evening she invited me back to her apartment to help with a final presentation. I figured I'd give her moral support and snack on popcorn while she compiled slides. Her living room was covered in textbooks and colored sticky notes. She dimmed the lights and set her laptop on the coffee table. I plopped down on the couch and watched as she clicked through slide after slide about attachment styles, flirting cues, and interpersonal bonding. At first I was impressed. These were some serious academic topics. But then I realized the title on one slide was my full name in bold letters. My heart skipped. I leaned forward and saw graphs showing how often I checked my phone during dates, charts ranking my eye contact versus hers, analysis of my humor style. Then there were photos of me, snaps she'd taken without telling me, captured mid-laugh, mid-bite of a burger, mid-text to my buddy. And worst of all, bullet points describing my weaknesses and areas for behavioral improvement. I felt sick. She looked up from the screen, bright-eyed, asking if I thought the data was statistically significant. I gaped at her. "You can't use my info without permission," I blurted. She frowned and said something about standard ethical practices and IR guidelines, but her tone was off, like she was reading from a script. I told her I never signed anything, never agreed to be part of some public presentation. She scratched her head and said she would just remove my name and replace it with a code. I was furious. This wasn't a private class project anymore. It felt like she was exposing me for grades. I asked why she didn't just ask for my consent. She got defensive, saying that would ruin the spontaneity of her data. She claimed that real behavior only happens when subjects don't know they're being studied. I slammed my hand on the couch, making her jump. I told her it was a betrayal, that every laugh, every confession, every awkward pause had been fodder for her slides. She looked hurt, but not by my anger, by how uncooperative I was. I collected my bag and stormed out, her calling after me about being too sensitive for academia. I walked the 3 blocks home like I'd been dumped by the person I thought I was falling for. My brain was buzzing with outrage and embarrassment. Had she shown my data in front of classmates? Had she told people my secrets? I tried to call her, but she didn't pick up. I texted her to delete all my photos and my name and any mention of me. She replied hours later asking if we could talk. I didn't respond. The next day in the library, I saw her at a group study table, laptop open, prepping for what looked like a class presentation. I recognized the slide deck. It was my deck with some personal details blacked out. She caught my eye and offered a polite nod. I turned away, blinking back tears of frustration. A friend sitting next to me asked why I was upset. I mumbled something about consent and data privacy. She patted my shoulder and said, "That sucks. You okay?" I wasn't okay. I felt like a textbook case of someone who trusted too easily. I kept replaying all the sweet moments, her complimenting my smile, her sticking up for me during group photos, her research questions that got me talking about my childhood. I felt used a lab rat for her grade. I realized I didn't even know her real intentions until that slideshow revealed it all. Over the next week, I changed my routines. I avoided the juice bar, skipped the thrift shop rendezvous, even stopped answering her messages. She texted me once saying she was sorry, that she never meant harm, that she'd pulled all my data. I read it and deleted it. I decided I couldn't believe her anymore. I was done being part of someone's academic case study. Now every time I walk past that juice bar, I feel a pang of regret and relief. Regret that I let someone study me without asking relief that I'm out of that scenario. I still love smoothies, but I stick to my usual spot, away from curious psychology students and their slide decks. I learned the hard way that if you're going to share your story, you better be in control of how it's told. And next time someone says, trust me, it's just for a project, I'll remember the week I turned my life into class fodder, and I won't fall for it again. I never expected a random apartment viewing to turn into a 6-week charade. I was hunting for a new place, and he showed up like the universe's plot twist. Tall, easy smile, holding a set of keys like he owned the building. His name was Mason. He said he worked in real estate, which made sense, but I didn't know then that he was about to sell me something far bigger than a studio flat. Our first date was the open house itself. I told myself it was practical, checking out the bachelor pad layout, but he made it feel like a grand tour. He pointed out the skyline view from the balcony, joked about hosting rooftop parties, and I laughed because he had that effortless banter down pat. When he suggested grabbing coffee afterward, I shrugged and followed him to the cafe across the street. He ordered 2 flat whites and slid one toward me with a smirk, like he'd just shown me the secret level of a video game. For the next 5 weeks, we moved in tandem. He'd invite me to design fairs, art openings, even a friends and family wine tasting at some vineyard he had access to. I tagged along, sipping Pinot and complimenting his recommendations. He introduced me to his mom at brunch. She nodded approvingly, asked if I was seeing someone serious. I laughed and said it was early days. She said, well, let me know if you ever need my famous chocolate chip pancakes for a girl's morning. I felt warm at the thought of meeting his family, like we were accelerating while others were still idling. At week 4, I noticed a subtle shift. He started talking about our engagement timeline after brunch, mentioning how his mom was already planning a combined shower and bachelor party. I laughed it off. He must have been kidding. But he didn't laugh. He was serious. He said his mom had teased him about settling down for years, and that bringing someone home who could play fiancé for a weekend would finally calm her down. He said engagement paperwork would make him look responsible to his firm. Something about image in the corporate world. My stomach twisted. I asked why he was telling me this now. He dug into his bag and pulled out a ring box, plastic foam cradle, fake diamond sparkle, and handed it to me with a shrug. It's temporary, he said. She'll love it, and then we move on. I stared at the ring, thinking he was joking, but the look in his eyes was flat, like he'd been rehearsing the moment. He said we'd pretend for a weekend, snap some photos, share them with his folks, and then break the news that we were taking it slow. He made it sound so harmless, like a viral marketing stunt for his personal life. I felt torn between laughing at the absurdity and feeling like I'd missed a memo. He told me I didn't have to commit to anything real, just smile at family gatherings and post a few staged selfies. He painted it as a 2-day thing. I agreed, partly to see where this crazy idea would go, partly because I was curious about his family brunches. He seemed earnest when he said he cared about me in his own weird way, that this stunt was to protect his reputation. I wanted to believe him. That weekend, I stayed at his place. We staged pictures on his balcony, me in a sundress, him in a crisp shirt. His mom video called him to show off her garden, and he introduced me as his fiancé. My smile felt like plaster. She cooed about grandchildren one day and asked when we'd set a date. I cringed on camera and mouthed help. He laughed nervously and said we were just exploring options. She beamed and said she'd bake us a cake anyway. After the call, he turned to me and said it was all going perfectly. I felt like a prop, a piece of furniture moved around for effect. We went to his family's barbecue on Sunday. Buns toasted, potato salad spilled across paper plates, strangers asking about wedding colors. I smiled, nodded, pretended I'd already chosen bridesmaid dresses. I felt hollow, like I'd wandered into someone else's life and forgotten the exit. Later that night, as we cleaned up his sink full of recyclables, I confronted him. This feels wrong, I said. He sighed, scrubbed a glass, and said, it's just a temporary thing. Think of it as helping me tick a box. I told him I wasn't comfortable being a lie on his checklist. He blinked and said I was overreacting. He claimed I didn't understand corporate pressure. That week after week of questions from his mom was making him anxious. He said I could pull out any time, no hard feelings. I went home feeling exhausted. I replayed every detail, the ring in my hand, his mom's gleeful questions, the photo ops. I realized I'd been tricked into a fake engagement before I even knew we were official. I deleted the staged selfies from my phone, untagged him from my story, and decided I needed space. That Monday, I bumped into him at the office supply store. He waved, all casual like nothing was up. I avoided eye contact, got what I needed, and left. Later, he texted, "Hey, you okay? Talk tonight." I stared at the message and texted back, "No thanks." I blocked his number and removed him from my social feeds. I felt awful for letting him rope me into this. I wondered how many other dates he tricked into phony commitments. In the days that followed, I told friends the bizarre tale. They shook their heads, asked if I was joking. When I showed them the ring box, they laughed, then frowned. They said he crossed a line. I agreed. I realized that while I was on board for the experiment, I hadn't given true consent. He manipulated my caring side, used my image to placate his family. I felt used and embarrassed that I hadn't spotted the red flags. A couple weeks later, I got a package, a framed photo of us on that balcony, printed with "Congratulations, Mason and Laura" in gold script. I ripped off the glass, ripped the print in half, and tossed it in the bin. I never looked at his mom's pancake recipe card he slipped into the gift. I realized I didn't owe him or his family anything. I reclaimed my weekends, solo brunches, gym classes, museum visits. I stopped swiping through dating apps that glorified long-term labels. I decided I wanted honesty, even if it meant fewer perfect dates. Now, I'm hunting for a new place again and sticking to solo viewings. When someone offers me their keys and a coffee, I'll just smile and say thanks without saying yes to anything I don't mean. I still catch myself glancing at the skyline, remembering how real things can feel until you find out you're just a plot device. And I'm okay with being single rather than being someone's fake fiancé. I still can't wrap my head around how I dated someone who technically I never met. It kicked off at a warehouse party under flickering string lights. The kinder the bass is so low you feel it in your bones. I saw her by the makeshift bar, hair shining under neon, laughing at something her friend said. She turned, caught my eye, and waved me over. It felt electric. We hit it off right away. She told me her major was art history, though she was more into graffiti, she said. We spent the rest of the night elbow to elbow painting a mural on a plywood panel, our hands streaked with neon green and hot pink. She joked that our masterpiece would outlast any gallery exhibit. I went home that night with paint under my nails, grinning like an idiot. Over the next few weeks, we were inseparable. Late night coffees at the 24-hour diner, where she teased me about my love for blueberry pancakes. We'd wander into empty classrooms on campus, setting up blankets and sharing stories against chalkboard backdrops. She told me about her twin sister, Megan, who was off studying abroad in Europe. I thought it sounded so cool, meeting her someday. Around week 2, I finally met Megan, kind of. I stumbled into the student union looking for her at a girls' night event and saw someone who looked just like the girl I'd been dating. Same laugh, same hoodie, same crooked smile. I blinked twice before saying hi. She raised an eyebrow and said, "You must be Alex. Jenny told me so much about you." I laughed and asked where Jenny was. Megan shrugged and said she was tied up with that big art project she mentioned. I shrugged and chatted with Megan for a bit, feeling like I was talking to my own reflection. She was friendly, complimented my concert t-shirt collection, told me to treat her sister right. Then she grabbed her phone and breezed off. I thought nothing of it. Quentin's right. I texted Jenny later. Met Megan today. She's as cool as you. Jenny replied with a thumbs up emoji and a grin emoji. All good. Weeks 3 and 4 were a whirlwind. Jenny and I went on biking adventures to hidden street art alleys. She taught me how to sketch with charcoal. Then we'd watch the sun dip behind the library stacks. We shared playlists. She belted out lyrics in my car like we were on a stage. I laughed so hard my ribs hurt. She called me my muse, and I called her my inspiration. It felt so right. But then I saw Megan again, this time at a poetry slam. I waved, she waved back, mouth twisting into a playful grin. When I told Jenny I ran into her identical sister again, she gave me this weird look, like she was caught off guard, then said Megan had been home for a surprise visit. I accepted it, chalking it up to bad timing. By week 5, things got weird. I went to her apartment to surprise her after my exam and found 2 plates set on the table. I rang the bell, and Jenny opened the door wearing a different outfit than I'd ever seen her in. She smiled and said, "Hey, stranger." Her voice sounded the same, but her hair was braided instead of loose waves. I blinked. She laughed, asked if I was okay. I said, yeah, just surprised. She said her sister had painted her hair that morning as part of a dare. That should have been the moment I backed away. Instead, I shrugged and joined her. We ate pasta, watched old sitcom reruns, and the Jenny at my side was warm and hilarious. She kissed me goodnight, and I felt I was floating back to my own place. A couple days later, I went out to the skate park and found Jenny leaning against the ramp, looking upset. She hugged me tight and whispered, "Sorry I've been weird." I kissed her forehead and asked what was going on. She said it was nothing. Family stuff. We laughed it off and skated until moonrise. I thought everything was fine. Then came the reveal. I showed up at her place for movie night, popcorn in hand, and saw her twins' art project plastered across her wall. Drawings of me, wearing the same hoodie, the same grin, caught in every pose I'd posed for the camera. I froze. She walked in behind me and said, "Hey, babe." That voice wasn't quite right. I turned, and there were actually two of them, identical except one had a tiny dimple I'd never noticed before. I stumbled back, heart hammering. They exchanged a look and burst into laughter. They told me I'd actually gone on my first date with Megan, not Jenny. Megan said she wanted to see if I'd noticed the switch, ruined her confidence that she'd never get asked out. So she and Jenny pulled a prank. Sometimes one would show up as the other, switching apartments, switching clothes. They'd text me from the same phone, using captions like "me" or "sis" in the messages that I never caught. I felt my cheeks burn. They shrugged, saying it was all in good fun, a social experiment to test if I could tell them apart. They thought it was hilarious that I never realized until that moment twins could be interchangeable. I looked at their identical faces, the smirks, and felt tears sting my eyes. I trusted one of them, or so I thought, but it had been both playing parts. I felt dizzy, furious, betrayed. Every memory felt stolen. The boardwalk painting, the diner breakfasts, the midnight doodles in classrooms. They'd all been part of a joke I never agreed to. I wanted to scream, but my voice sounded small in the room. I told them to explain how long it had been going on. They said since day one, sometimes an hour here, a date there, swapping details so I'd never suspect. They watched how I reacted, rated my confusion, and then shared it as content on their private group chat. I dropped the popcorn, stormed out, and ran across campus without looking back. I kept replaying their faces, Jenny's riddle smile, Megan's mimicked grin, and wondering if either of them had ever been real to me. I felt cold, used like a stunt pulled on national television, except nobody was filming, just those two. I haven't gone back. I deleted their number, untagged every photo on social media, and avoided twin-related things everywhere I go. I'm still pissed that they laughed at me, pitched me into their game without asking. My friends call me dramatic, but I feel like a lab rat, tested and discarded. Now I stick to solo nights, documentaries, pizza for one, and headphones so I don't hear my own thoughts. I learned that if someone's too good at being the perfect match, you might be part of someone's inside joke. I'm slower to fall for smiles under neon lights. If someone brings twins into the mix, I'm out, no questions asked. I never planned for our summer to be more than a few beachside barbecues and ice cream cones, but Hassan had a way of turning ordinary days into something cinematic. We met at the community pool. He was doing laps with impossible ease, and I was floating on my back, staring at clouds. He waved when I flailed a bit too close to his lane, and by the time I climbed out, dripping and embarrassed, he'd already introduced himself. He said he was studying creative writing and wanted inspiration for his next chapter. I thought he meant a novel, not a personal diary, so I shrugged and offered him a towel. That's how it began. For the first 2 weeks, it was pure sunshine. We'd snack on watermelon slices between swims, our palms pink from juice, laughing at the ridiculousness of doing cannonballs in the middle of July heat. He'd ask me to read his latest poems, and I'd lean over his notebook, tracing the words with my finger like they were braille. He'd smile, eyes soft, and say it was his muse. I felt like I was starring my own romantic comedy, where the leads are just two kids with summer free and nowhere to be. We spent our nights chasing fireflies in my backyard, in reciting lines from his favorite poets while I caught bugs in a mason jar. He'd swap out poetry for story ideas. He was writing a self-published guide on attracting someone's interest, seduction techniques, he called it, but I never thought twice about what that really meant. It sounded harmless, like a how-to for writing love letters. I offered to help with his research, asked questions, described what made me tick, what vanquished my walls. I told him about my childhood crushes, the movies that made me swoon, the songs that made me cry. He listened, took notes on napkins on his phone on every scrap of paper he could find. Around week 3, I realized I was falling for him hard. I'd wake up to texts like morning, sunshine, and wrap my mind around how someone could be so inventive with compliments. He'd send voice messages humming a melody he said reminded him of me. I'd blush, then replay them until I knew every off-key note. I convinced myself he was sincere, that he saw something in me worth writing about. One evening, after a sunset walk on the pier, he suggested we go through his draft manuscript. I curled up on his couch, propped my head on his lap, and listened as he read passages about the ideal approach. He paused at a section titled Phase 1, the warm welcome, which described how he first said hi at the pool. I laughed when I realized he detailed my awkward splashes as part of the charm offensive. He chuckled, stroked my hair, and I leaned into him, feeling like the world was exactly as it should be. By week 4, our routine was locked in. Afternoons by the pool, evenings on his balcony under string lights, where he'd whip out his notebook and ask me to play along with scenarios. I'd giggle as he pretended to whisper sweet nothings, and he'd mark the ones that got the biggest reaction. Then he scribbled down bullet points. What gesture made me smile? Which lyric made me sigh? I thought it was a quirky way to get to know me better. I never stopped to think it was for a book. Then came the night I stumbled onto his desktop. He'd left his laptop unlocked, and I was looking for our favorite playlist when I saw a folder titled Submission Draft, Final Edits. I clicked it expecting poems, but instead I found chapter after chapter on human attraction patterns, peppered with real-life examples. And there in bold was my name and face. Case study A. Female subject, age 22. My heart dropped. I scrolled and saw transcripts of our conversations, my laughter transcribed as positive reinforcement, my confessions as emotional triggers. I saw a list of tweaks he'd made to his approach based on my reactions. I backed out of the folder, stomach churning. I felt every memory twist into something exploitative. The beach picnic where he noted how I inhaled popcorn. The late night drive where he logged my silence during emotional topics. He'd been so casual about it, slipping surveys into our conversations, joking that he was data collecting. I thought it was romantic attention. It was research for a book he planned to sell. I closed the laptop and crept back to the couch where he was waiting with 2 glasses of lemonade. He asked if I found my playlist. I froze, clutched the drink like a lifeline, and asked what book he was writing. His smile faltered. He admitted it was a self-published guide with real anecdotes illustrating his points. He said I'd given him permission by answering all his questions. I told him answering questions isn't the same as agreeing to be a living exhibit. He tried to apologize, but it sounded rote, like he was following a script for his apology chapter. He said I shouldn't feel awkward, that every writer borrows from life. He said the names would be changed. I shook my head. In his book, I wasn't a character, I was the main attraction. I asked how many other participants he tracked. He paused, then said there were a handful. I told him it was disgusting, that relationships aren't research projects. He looked hurt, said I was overreacting. I told him I'd spent weeks sharing my heart, trusting him, and he'd been writing a manual on how to manipulate me. I left his apartment that night under a moonlit sky, walking home with legs that felt too heavy to carry me. I replayed his questions, his notes, his earnest face as he jotted down my responses. I felt violated, like someone had cataloged my deepest feelings in neat bullet points. When I got home, I texted him, "Do not contact me again," and then I deleted his number. In the days that followed, I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up sweating, imagining my life as windows in his book. I packed up my favorite notebooks, tore out pages where I'd scrawled personal thoughts, and burned them in my backyard fire pit. It hurt to watch the smoke carry away memories of laughter and stars and lemonade, but I needed to reclaim my story. I told a couple close friends what happened. They were furious on my behalf, said I should demand he take down the book. I considered it, but realized I didn't need his words anymore. I didn't want to feed his publicity. Instead, I started writing my own journal, No audience, just me and blank pages. I wrote about betrayal, about summer nights that turned sour. I wrote about finding strength in knowing someone could treat you as an experiment and still pick out the pieces. A month later, I went back to the pool alone. I floated on my back, staring at the sky, imagining clouds untainted by someone's study. I texted my friends to meet me for smoothies afterward, laughing when they teased me about official debriefing. I ordered my usual strawberry mint blend and toasted to surviving something that felt like the ultimate plot twist. I still remember Hassan's easy smile and the way he made me feel seen. But now I know some attention comes with a price tag. I learned that sharing your heart doesn't mean handing someone the rights to publish it. And when someone asks for your secrets under the guise of creativity, you have every right to say no. Summer romances come and go, but your story is yours to write. I never imagined that matching on a book lovers app would turn me into someone's social media poll. It started on a Sunday afternoon at the Old Town Library, where I was hunting for a copy of that obscure sci-fi novel I'd been meaning to read. She was kneeling by the mystery shelf, brushing her fingers over faded spines like they held forgotten secrets. When I asked if she'd seen the edition I was looking for, she looked up with these bright eyes and said she had 2 copies at home. Before I knew it, we were trading recommendations over coffee in the library cafe, or swirling a chai latte, me nursing an Americano, and I felt an instant connection. Over the next 2 weeks, we fell into an easy rhythm. We met at that cafe, wandering to the nearby park afterward, sprawled on the grass and trading passages from our favorite authors. She introduced me to slam poetry nights at a tucked-away bar where we stood together under string lights, her hand brushing mine whenever a line hit hard. I thought we were just 2 people discovering how well our interests meshed. I never suspected I was also fodder for her private chat room. By week 3, our dates became almost ritualistic. Wednesday evenings were reserved for cooking together in her tiny apartment kitchen, clattering pans and tasting spoons flying as we tried new recipes. Fridays we hit up the local farmer's market, filling baskets with oranges, fresh basil, and homemade pastries. She'd tease me about my obsession with bargain stalls, and I'd laugh when she insisted on the best organic tomatoes. I figured that was just part of falling for someone, getting teased and learning their habits. Then came week 4, when I noticed her phone would stay on the table, locked but buzzing with notifications. It stopped the moment she slid in her pocket. I asked if everything was okay, and she said her friends were group chatting plans for a weekend trip. I shrugged and trusted her. I liked that she had a tight-knit crew, that her life included more than just me. Week 5 was when things started to feel off. We'd been talking on the couch after a late-night movie marathon when her phone pinged. A split-second pass of her eyes over the screen made me pause mid-popcorn bite. Later on our walk home, I asked about it. She said her friends were voting on where to meet for brunch the next morning. I smiled at her enthusiasm and told her I'd love to join them. She hesitated, said she wasn't sure they'd want me there. I laughed it off, thinking she meant the group was small. That weekend I got an invite to the chat itself. She handed me her phone and said, "They want to meet you," but when I unlocked it, I saw a list of polls, one labeled Date 5, keep going, with my face under it and options for yes, no, and maybe. My stomach dropped. I scrolled down and saw older polls. First kiss reaction, vote now, cooking night success, and movie night. Was he into it? Each poll showed a tally of votes and snarky comments like too awkward or pretty cute, but needs more charm. I looked up at her, heart pounding. She shrugged and said they were just helping her decide if this was worth her time. I asked how long she'd been doing this. She said since week 2, whenever we hit a milestone. Our first walk in the park, the first time I cooked her dinner, the first time we held hands, she'd sent quick updates with photos. Her friends had been watching, voting, and sometimes voting to pause the relationship until she saw some improvement. I felt like the ground had opened beneath me. She said it was all in good fun, that her friends were brutally honest and would help her avoid heartbreak. She insisted she cared about me, that she valued my company, but she needed their input before trusting her own judgment. I stared at the screen, my casual smile snapped into something I didn't recognize. I felt ridiculous for letting her turn our dates into a spectator sport. She tried to explain that she was overwhelmed by dating, that she wanted outside perspective to navigate her feelings. I told her I wasn't a living Tinder profile, and she didn't need a focus group to decide if she liked me. Her face fell. She said she thought it would make things easier, more scientific. I told her science doesn't belong in the middle of a dinner conversation or a kiss goodnight. That night, I walked home alone under street lamps that felt harsher than usual. I replayed every moment, when she laughed at my jokes, when she smiled at my poems, when she squeezed my hand just right. Were those real, or were they just points in her poll? I felt used, like I'd been auditioning for something I didn't know I'd applied to. The next day I called her. I confronted her again, saying I wanted to hear why she never asked me directly. She said she was scared of rejection and wanted a safety net. I told her that if she couldn't talk to me about her doubts, then she didn't respect me enough to be with me. She apologized, said she'd shut down the chat and delete the polls, but I was numb to apologies. We met at the cafe where it all began. She sat across from me, chai latte in hand. I told her I couldn't continue, that I needed someone who trusted their own gut. She started to cry, eyes glistening, saying she was sorry and that she really did like me. I told her I believed she liked me, but she'd never let me see it without an audience. I stood up, dropped cash for my drink, and left without looking back. In the days after, I tried not to hate her. I deleted my profile from the dating app we met on, blocked her number, and avoided the park bench where we used to sit. I told friends the story over beers. They laughed in shock, called her ridiculous. One friend said I should have made her hit no on that final poll. I laughed, realizing I would have voted no myself. Now, whenever I walk past the market stalls or see someone holding a phone mid-date, I imagine them pawing a crowd. It makes me sad, but it also keeps me from jumping headfirst into the next thing. I remind myself that I deserve someone whose first thought isn't let me see what my friends say. I deserve someone willing to face doubts and to talk them through with me directly. I still love slurping down a hot chai on lazy afternoons, but I go solo these days. I wander the aisles of the library, pick up new books, and whisper to the pages instead of a phone screen. I learned that love needs heart, not hand-raising, and that we grow best when we're seen for ourselves, not for the poll results we rack up. I saw him scrolling through his phone, fingers flying, lips curved in that dreamy way he did when he thought nobody was watching. He looked up, caught my eye, and flashed that smile, one I've been chasing for weeks. We'd met online, bonded over favorite guitar riffs and rainy day playlists, and for a while it felt like fate had downloaded him right into my life. Our first date was at a vinyl record store where he convinced the clerk to play an obscure track just for us. We leaned close in the listening booth, sharing earbuds, and I remember his warm breath on my ear as he whispered what the lyrics meant to him. I thought I was falling in love with someone genuine. He walked me home under streetlights, texting me later that night about how natural it felt. I stayed up reading his messages until my phone died. Over the next month, our routine was our own perfect rhythm. Late night calls where we debate superhero movies, morning voice notes of him strumming chords on his guitar, surprise visits to my art studio with flowers clipped from the community garden. He'd introduce me to his favorite ramen spot and convinced me to try karaoke for the first time. He cheered me on when my voice cracked, never letting me feel silly. Every moment together felt unscripted and real. Then week 5 rolled around, and I noticed odd things. Calls at weird hours and disappearing without warning, explaining it away as studio sessions or family errands. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of a woman's name lighting up his screen. Layla __ explores, and he'd switch apps like a reflex. I asked if everything was okay, and he'd say yes, but his jaw would tighten. I started to chalk it up to busy schedules. I wanted to trust him. It was week 6 when I saw the first red flag. I was scrolling through Instagram on his laptop to show him a meme, and a notification popped up. New message from Layla, 3:47 p.m. I clicked it out of curiosity and froze at the preview. Did you text her back? You know this was our rule. My heart dropped. I stared at a conversation between him and a Layla in another city. Same laugh emojis I used, same gifs we'd shared. They were setting boundaries, talking about winning some contest that tested who could juggle 2 lives longest. I shut the lid and walked out without a word. My mind was racing. Contest, boundaries, 2 lives. I got home and messaged him. We need to talk tonight. He replied with his usual calm, sure, everything okay. I stared at the screen and saw how effortlessly he lied. That evening, I stood on my balcony, phone in hand, waiting for him. When he arrived, mug of tea in each hand, He didn't notice my face had already started to ache. I asked him to explain Layla. He sat him down and took a deep breath. He told me about the double life challenge he and Layla had cooked up months ago. She was his girlfriend in her hometown. He was mine here, and they both tried to see who could juggle meeting someone new while keeping the old flame alive. He said it was for fun, a way to spice up long-distance boredom. He bragged that they'd gone weeks without getting caught, sending each other updates whenever I said something sweet or hinting that we were getting serious. I felt sick. He told me I was a great competitor, that I'd been so convincing he almost forgot his other plan. I couldn't believe I'd been part of some twisted contest instead of a relationship. I asked why he hadn't just ended it with Layla. He shrugged and said he feared disappointing her, then watched as we got along so well. He admitted he'd called her after our first date to report how impressed he was with me, and she congratulated him on leading the scoreboard. He smiled as he said it, like it was a trophy. I realized he wasn't sorry. I was just another point in his game. I felt hot tears sting my eyes. I wanted to scream, to slap him, but my voice trembled. Instead, I turned away, grabbing my coat. I told him I needed air, needed to clear my head. He followed, arms outstretched, begging me to listen. I told him to stop treating me like a player piece. He tried to hold me, but I shook him off and walked down the stairs into the night. Outside, the city lights blurred with my tears. I thought back to our karaoke night, his laughter echoing in the empty bar. I thought about the flowers he picked for me and how real they'd smelled. It all felt like a lie. I walked until I reached the late-night diner where we'd ordered pancakes at dawn. I sat at a booth, facing the edge of the tabletop, waiting for him to call. He texted, "Why are you ghosting me? I care about you." I stared at the words, then deleted them without a second thought. The next day, I packed up reminders of us, a mixtape CD he made, a sketchbook where I'd doodled us as cartoon characters, the mug he left at my place. I boxed them and tossed them at the curb. Later, I called up Layla on her number. It was still in his phone records I'd seen. A stranger answered and asked who was calling. I hung up, my throat raw from shouting. I realized I didn't want to speak to either of them, didn't want to fuel his ego or hurt. I just wanted him gone. For the next week, I avoided the cafe, the random spot, even the art studio felt too full of memories. I holed up with old journals and my favorite records, reminded myself I was worth more than a point tally on some scoreboard. I texted friends to drag me out, to remind me people can actually be honest. They did. One friend surprised me at my door with pizza, another grabbed my hand and took me dancing at a friend's house party. Their laughter felt healing. Now I'm back to my routines. Morning runs in the park, late-night reading sessions in the corner cafe that has nothing to do with him. I still love discovering new songs, but now I listen alone until the final chord, no need to share a headset. I've deleted dating apps for a minute, focusing on myself. I learned that sometimes the person you think is writing your love story is just scribbling in someone else's notebook too. I don't look over my shoulder anymore. I walk down the street without replaying his lies in my head. There's no scoreboard, no contest left. Just me figuring out what real connection feels like when it's not someone's double life challenge.